They said no human woman could survive carrying a hybrid child. The prophecies were clear. Such births meant death, chaos, the end of bloodlines. But when Aria Vale woke in that frozen fortress with three warlords standing over her and a second heartbeat pounding beneath her ribs, she realized the old stories had gotten one thing wrong. She wasn't going to die quietly. She wasn't going to hide. And when the entire world came for her unborn child, demanding its death before it could draw its first breath, she made a choice that would shatter everything they believed about power, survival, and what it means to refuse fear. Stay with us until the end to see how one woman's impossible decision changes everything. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. Let's see where you're watching from. The silence after a siege is never truly silent. Aria Vale knew that now, lying in the dim candlelight of the stronghold's inner chamber, her body aching in ways she couldn't name. Outside, the wind howled against stone walls 3 feet thick, but inside, the air hung heavy with the smell of blood, smoke, and something else, something metallic and wrong that made her teeth ache. Victory, they'd called it. The frozen stronghold had finally fallen. 3 weeks of brutal combat, of screaming and fire and the clash of steel on steel, and now, silence. The kind that pressed against your eardrums and made you wonder if you'd gone deaf. She shifted on the fur-covered bed and pain lanced through her abdomen, sharp, immediate, not the dull throb of bruises or the burn of shallow cuts. This was different. This was new. "Don't move!" Kale's voice came from somewhere to her left, rough as gravel. She turned her head slowly, found him sitting in the shadows near the door, his massive frame hunched forward, elbows on his knees. His dark eyes tracked her every breath. "You've been unconscious for 2 days." 2 days. Aria's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, fingers splaying across the leather tunic someone had dressed her in. Flat, still flat. But underneath, beneath skin and muscle, something pulsed, steady, insistent, wrong. "What happened?" Her voice came out hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Kyle didn't answer immediately. He stood instead, unfolding to his full height, nearly 7 feet of hard muscle and barely contained violence. The torchlight caught the scars crossing his bare arms, the fresh bandage wrapped around his ribs. He'd fought too. They all had. "You collapsed during the final breach," he said, moving closer. Each step deliberate, controlled, like he was approaching something fragile or dangerous. One moment you were standing, the next you were on the ground, bleeding. From where? Everywhere. His jaw tightened. Your nose, your ears, under your fingernails. The healers couldn't stop it at first. They thought... He stopped, looked away. "They thought we were losing you." Aria's fingers curled into the furs beneath her. She remembered fragments, the final push through the stronghold's gates, the clash of bodies in narrow corridors, the moment when enemy steel had come too close and something inside her had screamed, not with her voice, but with something deeper, something primal. And then, nothing. "Where are the others?" she asked, Rivens coordinating the perimeter sweep, Thorns dealing with the prisoners. Kale crouched beside the bed, bringing his face level with hers. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into every line of his features, the gray threading through his dark hair, the way his pupils dilated slightly when he looked at her, like he was trying to see through her skin to whatever lay beneath. "But they'll be back soon. We need to talk." "About what?" He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His palm settled against her stomach, warm and rough with calluses. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his eyes widened. "You feel it," she said. Not a question. "I feel them." His voice had gone quiet. Careful. "Aria, when did this happen? When did you—" "I don't know." The truth tasted bitter. "I didn't know until I woke up. But it's there. I can feel it. Like a second heartbeat that won't stop." Kale's hand didn't move. If anything, he pressed closer, his brow furrowing in concentration. "It's not just a heartbeat. It's pulling, drawing something from you, from the bond we share." The bond. Right. The thing that had kept her alive through a dozen battles she had no business surviving. The connection forged in blood and desperation between her and 3 of the most dangerous warlords in the Northern Territories. They'd claimed it was protection, a way to keep her breathing when the violence got too close. She'd called it a leash. "Is that why I collapsed?" she asked. "Probably." Kael withdrew his hand, stood, began pacing. 5 steps to the window, 5 steps back. A caged animal's rhythm. "The healer said your body went into shock. Whatever this is," he gestured vaguely toward her stomach. "It started feeding off your life force. If we hadn't been close enough to channel power through the bond, you'd be dead." Aria absorbed that, turned it over in her mind. Dead. She'd been hours away from dead, and she hadn't even known she was pregnant. "What happens now?" she asked. The door crashed open before Kale could answer. Riven strode in like a winter storm given human form, all sharp angles and controlled fury, his pale hair pulled back in a warrior's knot, ice-blue eyes scanning the room in half a second before locking onto Aria. He crossed the distance in 4 long strides, gripped her face between his hands, tilted her head back. "You're awake." Not relief in his voice. Assessment. Clinical. Pupils responsive, colors better. "Can you stand?" "Hello to you too," Aria muttered. "Can you stand?" Harder this time. She knocked his hands away, swung her legs over the side of the bed. The room tilted, righted itself. She gritted her teeth, pushed to her feet, and immediately understood why Kael had told her not to move. Pain exploded through her core, white-hot, doubling her over. Riven caught her before she hit the floor, lifted her like she weighed nothing, set her back on the bed with surprising gentleness. "That's a no, then." "It's getting worse," Kael said from the window, "faster than the healers predicted." "How much faster?" "At this rate? She has maybe 2 weeks before it kills her." Aria's head snapped up. "What?" Riven's expression didn't change. "You're carrying a hybrid child, Aria. Human mother, non-human fathers. The histories are very clear about what happens in cases like this." He paused. "Actually, they're clear about one thing. It doesn't happen. Because the mothers always die before the child can develop." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Always?" Aria's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Every recorded case? 37 documented attempts over the last 3 centuries. Riven pulled a chair close, sat, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. His hands were steady. They were always steady. "The longest any woman survived was 6 weeks. Most died within 10 days. And you're telling me this now because, well, because you need to understand what we're dealing with." He glanced at Kael, then back to her. "This isn't just a pregnancy. It's a death sentence. And if you die, the bond breaks, which means we're all vulnerable," Kael finished. "Every alliance we've built, every territory we control, every enemy we've kept at bay because they feared our combined strength. All of it collapses the moment you stop breathing." Aria stared at them. At these 2 warlords who'd carved empires out of frozen wasteland and blood, who'd never shown fear in her presence, who were looking at her now like she was a bomb with a timer counting down. "So what do you want me to do?" she asked. "You want me to... what? End it?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "No." The word came out flat, final. "No, I'm not doing that." "Aria, I said no." She pushed herself upright despite the pain, met Riven's ice-chipped gaze without flinching. "You don't get to make that choice. Neither of you. This is my body, my life. And if there's even a chance, there's no chance." Riven's voice could have cut glass. "This isn't about hope or willpower or any of that human nonsense you cling to. This is biology. Physics. The child is consuming you from the inside out, and in 2 weeks, there won't be enough left of you to save. Then we find another way. There is no other way." The shout echoed off stone walls. Riven's control slipping just for a moment before he reined it back in, took a breath, continued in a lower tone. "I've consulted every healer in the stronghold, sent messengers to the southern archives. There is no precedent for survival, no ancient remedy, no magical solution, just death. And I will not..." His jaw worked. "I will not stand by and watch you die because you're too stubborn to accept reality." Aria felt something hot building behind her eyes. Tears. Anger. Both. "And I will not kill my own child because you're too afraid to fight for something difficult. This isn't about fear. It's exactly about fear." She stood again, slower this time, one hand braced against the wall. The pain was manageable if she didn't breathe too deeply. You're afraid of losing your power, your control, your perfect little alliance that keeps you safe. We're afraid of losing you, Kale's voice, quiet from the window. When she looked at him, she found his expression unreadable. Don't confuse pragmatism with cruelty, Aria. We've seen what happens when people die in childbirth in our world. The screaming, the blood, the way they beg at the end when the pain gets too bad to think. I won't watch that happen to you. The tears came then, hot and unwelcome. Aria swiped at them angrily. So that's it? You've already decided? We've decided to keep you alive, Riven said. By whatever means necessary. Even if it means taking away my choice. Yes. The word landed like a blade between her ribs. Aria looked between them, Kael at the window, Riven in his chair, both watching her with expressions carved from stone, and understood with sudden, terrible clarity what was about to happen. You're going to lock me in here, she said slowly. Aren't you? You're going to seal the fortress and make sure I can't leave until you've handled this. Neither of them denied it. When? Her voice shook. When does my cage get locked? It already is. Thorn's voice came from the doorway. Aria spun, too fast, pain lancing through her, and found the third warlord leaning against the frame, arms crossed over his scarred chest. Where Kael was brutal strength and Riven was cold calculation, Thorn was something else entirely. Smoke and shadows. The knife you never saw coming. He pushed off the door frame, moved into the room with a predator's grace. Perimeters secure. 20 guards on rotation. No one in or out without express permission from the three of us. His dark eyes found hers. You're safe now. I'm trapped. Semantics. He shrugged. But yes, for your own protection. Aria's hands curled into fists. And if I refuse to cooperate? Then we keep you sedated until the healers can perform the procedure. Thorn's tone was conversational. Pleasant, even. Like they were discussing the weather. Riven's already prepared the necessary compounds. Quick, painless. You'll wake up in a few hours, and it'll be over. You're monsters. We're realists. He moved closer, until they stood toe to toe, and she had to crane her neck to meet his gaze. The world out there, the one beyond these walls, is full of people who want us dead. All of us. You think they won't hear about this? About a human woman carrying a hybrid child? About what that could mean? What could it mean? Change. The word came out soft, dangerous. The kind that topples kingdoms and reshapes power structures. The kind that makes desperate people do desperate things. His hand came up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, gentle, mocking. They'll come for you, Aria, and they won't stop until you and that child are nothing but ash. Aria jerked away from his touch. So you hide me. Lock me up. Take away everything that makes me human. We keep you breathing. Kael again, his voice cutting through the tension. That's all that matters. Not to me. Then you're a fool. The slap came before she could think, her palm connecting with Kael's face hard enough to snap his head to the side. The sound cracked through the room like breaking ice. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Kael turned back to her, slowly, a red mark blooming across his cheek. His expression hadn't changed. Feel better? No. Aria's hand throbbed. But I'll do it again if you call me a fool. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. Noted. Riven stood, placed himself between them. This isn't productive. We're all exhausted. Aria needs rest, and we need to finalize security protocols. He looked at her. Sleep, eat. Let the healers examine you again in the morning. We'll discuss options then. There are no options, Aria said bitterly. You've made that clear. There are always options. Thorn moved to the door, pulled it open. Some are just worse than others. They filed out one by one. Riven first, then Kael, then Thorn, who paused in the doorway long enough to say, The guards have orders to keep you comfortable. Ask for whatever you need. Except my freedom. His smile was razor thin. Except that. The door closed, locked. The sound of the bolt sliding home was very, very loud. Aria stood in the center of the room, alone for the first time in days, and felt the walls pressing in. Not metaphorically. Actually pressing, like the stone itself was shrinking, tightening, until she couldn't breathe. She made it to the chamber pot before she vomited. The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and fear and growing, gnawing rage. Healers came and went, poking and prodding with cool clinical efficiency. They took her blood, measured her pulse, pressed their hands against her abdomen, and whispered to each other in languages she didn't speak. None of them would meet her eyes. Food appeared on silver trays, rich stews and fresh bread and fruit she knew must have cost a fortune in the middle of winter. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing. The guards outside her door changed shifts with military precision. She counted them by their footsteps. 4 sets. Heavy boots. Probably male. Definitely armed. Night fell. Rose. Fell again. And through it all, the second heartbeat continued. Steady. Insistent. Growing stronger while she grew weaker. On the 3rd day, she woke to find all 3 warlords in her room. Kyle sat in the chair Riven had occupied before, his massive frame somehow folded into the too small seat. Riven stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the frozen landscape beyond. Thorn leaned against the wall near the door, watching her with those unsettling dark eyes. "Good morning," Thorn said. "Or afternoon. Hard to tell in this light." Aria pushed herself upright, every muscle protesting. "What do you want?" "We've been discussing your situation," Riven said without turning from the window. "And we've reached a consensus." "How democratic of you." "The procedure will take place tomorrow at dawn," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The healers are confident they can preserve your life with minimal risk. Recovery should take approximately 2 weeks, after which— "No." Now he turned. "I'm sorry?" "I said no." Aria swung her legs over the side of the bed, stood on shaking legs. "I'm not doing it, and you can't make me." "Actually," Thorn said pleasantly, "we can. The sedatives are already prepared. We'd prefer your cooperation, but it's not required." Aria's vision swam. From weakness or fury, she couldn't tell. "You would drug me, strap me down, cut this child out of my body against my will, and you think that's acceptable?" "We think it's necessary," Kyle said quietly. "There's a difference." "Not to me." "Then you're not thinking clearly." Riven crossed to her in 3 long strides, gripped her shoulders. Not hard, but firm enough that she couldn't pull away. "Listen to me. I have scouts reporting unusual movement along our borders. 3 different factions that haven't spoken to each other in decades are suddenly coordinating, sharing intelligence. They know Aria. Somehow they already know about the child." Ice slid down her spine. "How?" "Does it matter?" His fingers tightened. "What matters is that they're coming, and when they get here, they won't ask nicely. They'll burn this stronghold to the ground and everyone in it to ensure that child never draws breath. Then we fight." "We can't." Frustration bled into his voice. "Not while you're in this condition. The bond is too unstable. Every time your life force dips, it drains us. We're operating at maybe 60% capacity against 3 coordinated armies. We'd last a week. Maybe." Aria stared at him. "So your solution is to kill the child, break the threat, and hope our enemies go away?" "Our solution is to survive." Riven released her, stepped back. "Everything else is negotiable." "Not this." She met his gaze, held it. "Not this." Silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Then Kael spoke. "There might be another way." All eyes turned to him. He stood slowly, moved to the center of the room. "What if we don't fight? What if we don't hide? What if we show them?" "Show them what?" Thorn asked. "Proof." Kael looked at Aria. "Proof that the child isn't a threat, that it can be controlled, that you're strong enough to carry it to term and survive." Riven's expression darkened. "She's not strong enough. We've established that." "Not yet, but she could be." Kael turned to him. "If we pool our power, if we keep her close, maintain constant physical proximity to channel energy through the bond—" "That's a fantasy," Riven cut him off. "We'd have to be with her every moment, every second. The drain would be enormous." "But possible." "Theoretically." "Then we try it." Kael's voice hardened. We give her a chance, and while we're doing that, we send emissaries to our enemies. We invite them here. Let them see for themselves that this isn't the apocalypse their prophecies predict. Thorn laughed. Actually laughed. You want to invite hostile armies into our stronghold while our power is divided? That's suicide. That's diplomacy, Kael shot back. Something we've avoided for too long. These people are afraid. Fear makes them dangerous. But if we can show them there's nothing to fear, they'll kill us anyway, Riven finished. Because that's what people do when they're afraid. They destroy the thing that scares them. Not if we make it more dangerous to attack than to accept. Kael's eyes gleamed. We show strength, unity. We prove that the child isn't a weapon waiting to explode. It's under control, and anyone who comes for it will have to go through all of us. The silence that followed was different, thoughtful. Aria found her voice. You'd do that? Risk everything? We're already risking everything, Kael said. At least this way you get a choice. She looked at Riven, then Thorn, waiting. Riven spoke first. It's insane. Probably, Kael agreed. The odds are terrible. Always have been. And if it fails, we all die. Yes. Another pause. Then Riven exhaled slowly. I hate this plan. Does that mean you'll support it? It means I'll agree to a trial period, 2 weeks. If Aria's condition worsens beyond what we can sustain, we proceed with the original plan. No arguments. His gaze locked onto Aria. And you will cooperate, completely. No running, no secrets. No heroic stupidity. You stay close, you do what we tell you, and you let us keep you alive. Understood? Aria's throat was tight. Understood. Thorn? The third warlord shrugged. Why not? I've always wanted to die doing something monumentally stupid. Excellent. Kael almost smiled. Then we're agreed. We have 2 weeks to convince the world that a hybrid child isn't the end of everything. Should be simple. None of them laughed, because they all knew the truth. Simple was the last thing this would be. The transition from prisoner to whatever she was now happened faster than Aria expected. Within hours, her small chamber was abandoned in favor of a larger suite in the stronghold's central tower. Not a cage, they were careful to never call it that, but the guards remained. The locks stayed in place, and everywhere she went, at least one of the 3 warlords shadowed her steps. Constant proximity, Kael had said, to keep the power flowing, to keep her alive. It felt like drowning on dry land. By the end of the first week, Aria understood the true cost of survival. It wasn't the physical closeness, though that was exhausting in its own way. It was the loss of every private moment, every quiet breath, every second where she could just be without someone watching, assessing, calculating how much longer she had. Riven was the worst. He monitored everything, her food intake, her sleep patterns, the exact moment when the pain started each day and how long it lasted. He kept detailed notes in a leather journal, cross-referenced with reports from the healers, searching for patterns that might tell them how much time they had left. Thorn, at least, was entertaining. He told stories to fill the silence, wild tales from battlefields and brothels, each more outrageous than the last. She suspected half of them were lies, but she didn't care. The sound of his voice pushed back the walls. Kael simply sat with her. No words, no expectations, just presence. Solid, unwavering, like a mountain that had no intention of moving. And through it all, the child grew. She felt it happening. Not with her hands, there was still no visible change, but deeper, in her bones, in the marrow. Something ancient and powerful was waking up inside her, and it was hungry. On the 8th day, the first emissary arrived. Aria heard the commotion from her tower room, shouting, the clang of gates opening, the thunder of hooves on frozen ground. She moved to the window, pressed her face against the frosted glass. Below, in the stronghold's main courtyard, a delegation was dismounting. 50 soldiers in gleaming armor, banners that snapped in the wind, bearing sigils she didn't recognize. And at their center, a woman, tall, regal, with silver hair braided into a crown and eyes like chips of amber. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Lady Seraphine, Riven said from behind her. Aria hadn't heard him enter. Representative of the Eastern Confederacy. She's difficult. Why is she here? To see you, to verify the reports. He moved beside her, gazed down at the courtyard. They don't believe a human can survive carrying a hybrid. They think we're lying, that this is some political maneuver to gain leverage. And when they see I'm telling the truth, then things get complicated. The meeting took place in the stronghold's great hall, a cavernous space of stone and shadow where countless treaties had been negotiated over the centuries. Aria sat at the head of a long table, flanked by all three warlords. Across from her, Lady Seraphine studied her with the intensity of a jeweler examining a questionable gemstone. "You look pale," Seraphine said. Her voice was silk over steel. "Weak." "I'm pregnant," Aria replied, "not dying." "The two are often synonymous in cases like yours." Seraphine leaned back in her chair. 37 documented attempts, 37 failures. What makes you believe you're special? I don't believe I'm special. I just believe I'm stubborn. A smile ghosted across Seraphine's lips. Stubbornness won't keep you breathing when the child starts consuming your organs. No, Kyle said, but we will. Seraphine's attention shifted to him. The bond, yes. I've heard the theories. You channel power through an ancient blood connection, keeping her alive through sheer force of will. Fascinating. Also unsustainable. We've managed so far, Riven said coolly. For 8 days. What happens at 80? 800? Seraphine's fingers drummed against the table. I've consulted our archives, spoken with scholars who specialize in hybrid genetics. The consensus is clear. Even with your power, the human body simply cannot withstand what this child will demand. You're delaying the inevitable. Then why are you here? Aria asked. If you're so certain I'm going to die. Because if you somehow don't die, if you manage to birth this child, it will change everything. Seraphine stood, moved to the windows overlooking the frozen landscape. A hybrid, a true hybrid, born of human and other blood. Do you understand what that means? The power such a being would possess, the threat it would represent? It's a baby, Aria said flatly, not a weapon. Everything is a weapon if you know how to wield it. Seraphine turned back to her, and I cannot allow a weapon of that magnitude to exist outside my control. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Thorn's hand moved to the knife at his belt. That sounds suspiciously like a threat. It's a statement of fact. Seraphine's expression didn't change. I'm not here to negotiate, gentlemen. I'm here to present terms. Surrender the child upon its birth, and the Confederacy will guarantee your safety. Refuse, and we will take it by force. Those are your options. Silence. Then Aria laughed. It started as a chuckle, low in her throat, and built until she was doubled over, tears streaming down her face. Pain shot through her abdomen, but she couldn't stop. The absurdity of it, the sheer breathtaking audacity, was too much. You're threatening to take my unborn child, she managed between gasps, from 3 of the most dangerous warlords in the Northern Territories, while we're standing in their stronghold, surrounded by their armies, and you think we'll just hand it over? I think you're a pragmatic woman who understands when she's outmatched. Seraphine's voice could have frozen fire. The Confederacy controls half the continent. We have resources you can't imagine. Armies that make yours look like children playing with wooden swords. If we decide to take this stronghold, we will. The only variable is how many people die in the process. Then I guess we'll find out, Aria said. The laughter had stopped. Her voice was cold, clear. Because I'm not giving you my child. Not now. Not ever. Then you're condemning everyone in this fortress to death. No? Aria stood, placed her hands flat on the table, met Seraphine's gaze without flinching. You are. By coming here and making demands instead of asking questions. By treating a human life like a commodity to be traded. By assuming fear will make me compliant. And what will make you compliant? Nothing. Aria smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Because I'm not the weapon you should be afraid of, Lady Seraphine. I'm just the one carrying it. And if you push me hard enough, you'll find out exactly what happens when a mother has nothing left to lose. For a long moment, Seraphine said nothing, just stared at this human woman who should have been terrified, who should have been begging, who was instead standing in front of 3 warlords and daring an entire confederacy to try. Then she nodded once, sharply. 2 weeks, Seraphine said. I'll give you 2 weeks to reconsider. After that, my patience and my mercy will be exhausted. She moved toward the door, her soldiers falling into formation behind her. At the threshold, she paused, looked back. For what it's worth, I hope you survive, Aria Vale. You have a spine. I respect that. But respect won't save you when the armies come. The door closed behind her. Aria collapsed back into her chair, shaking. Well, Thorn said into the silence. That went well. Kale's hand settled on her shoulder, warm, steady. You did good. I just declared war on half the continent, Aria whispered. No, Riven corrected. You declared that you won't be bullied. There's a difference. Is there? She looked up at him. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I just sentenced us all to death. Maybe. Kael squeezed her shoulder. But you'll die on your feet instead of your knees. That counts for something. Aria wished she believed him. Chet. The story continues with rising tension, but this section ends here to maintain proper pacing. The narrative will resume with part 2 when you're ready. The nightmare started on the 9th day. Aria would wake gasping, drenched in sweat that had nothing to do with the furs piled on her bed. The dreams were always the same, darkness pressing in from all sides, something clawing at her from the inside, and a voice that wasn't hers whispering words she couldn't understand but felt in her bones. Tonight was worse. She jolted awake to find Kael already at her bedside, one hand pressed against her forehead, his brow furrowed in concentration. The room swam in and out of focus. Too hot. Everything was too hot. Your fever's spiking again, he said. Not a question, a statement. He'd been monitoring her temperature every few hours since Seraphine left. 3rd time this week. I'm fine. The lie tasted like copper, blood. She'd bitten her tongue in her sleep. You're not. He pulled his hand back, and she immediately felt the loss of his touch, that steady flow of power that kept the pain manageable. The bond's straining. Whatever the child is taking from you, it's accelerating. Aria pushed herself upright, ignored the way the room tilted. Through the window, she could see the first gray light of dawn creeping across the frozen landscape. 12 days since Seraphine's ultimatum. 2 days left before the Confederacy's deadline. 2 days before everything went to hell. Where are the others? She asked. Riven's interrogating the scout who came in last night. Thorn's reinforcing the eastern perimeter. Kyle stood, moved to the water basin, returned with a damp cloth. He pressed it against her forehead with surprising gentleness for hands that had crushed skulls. You need to rest. I've been resting for 12 days. I'm going insane. Better insane than dead. She batted the cloth away. Is there a difference anymore? Kale's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he crossed to the window, stared out at the stronghold's courtyard where guards were already drilling in the pre-dawn light. Their movements were sharp, efficient, preparing for war. The scout reported troop movements, he said finally. 3 armies converging on our position, the Confederacy from the east, the northern clans from beyond the mountains, and something else, something the scout couldn't identify, moving through the frozen passes. Aria's blood went cold. How many? Combined? Close to 20,000. 20,000. Against their garrison of maybe 2,000. And that was counting every able body in the stronghold, cooks, stable hands, anyone who could hold a weapon. We can't win that fight, she said. No. Kael's reflection in the window was grim. We can't. Then what do we do? He turned to face her. We buy time. We fortify. We make them bleed for every inch of ground. And we pray that whatever plan Riven's concocting actually works. Riven has a plan? He has something. Whether it's a plan or a particularly elaborate form of suicide remains to be seen. Before Aria could respond, the door burst open. Riven strode in, his pale hair disheveled, ice-blue eyes blazing with something that might have been excitement or fury. With him, the 2 emotions looked identical. Get dressed, he said without preamble. Both of you, we have a problem. Another one? Aria muttered. A different one. Riven moved to the table, spread out a map weighted at the corners with daggers. The scout I interrogated wasn't from any of the armies we're tracking. He was sent by someone inside the stronghold. The temperature in the room dropped. Someone here is feeding information to our enemies? Kale's voice could have cut stone. Not just information, strategic intelligence, guard rotations, supply routes, weak points in our defenses. Riven's finger stabbed at various points on the map. Whoever it is has been at it for weeks, maybe longer. Aria's stomach churned. Did the scout give you a name? He gave me 3. Riven looked up, and his expression was death itself. All high-ranking officers. All with access to sensitive information. All currently under guard in the lower cells awaiting interrogation. You think all 3 are traitors? I think at least one is. Maybe more. He straightened. But that's not the problem. Then what is? The information they've been selling. Riven's gaze locked onto Aria. It's not about our defenses. It's about you. Specifically about your condition. How far along you are. How weak the bond has made us. How much longer we estimate you can survive. Ice slid down her spine. They're telling our enemies exactly when to strike. Precisely. They're waiting for you to get weak enough that we can't defend properly. Then they'll hit us with everything they have. Kale slammed his fist against the wall hard enough to crack stone. How long have we got? According to the intelligence that's been leaked, 5 days, maybe 6. Riven's expression was carved from granite. After that, they estimate the drain on our power will be too severe. We'll be vulnerable. So we have less than a week to identify the traitor, shore up our defenses, and somehow convince 3 hostile armies not to attack. Aria heard the hysteria creeping into her voice. Wonderful. Any other good news? Riven and Kale exchanged a look. There's one more thing, Riven said slowly. The scout mentioned something else. A rumor circulating among our enemies about what happens if the child is born. What about it? They don't just fear it. They worship it. He paused. There's a faction, small but growing, that believes a hybrid birth would signal the return of the old ones. Ancient beings that supposedly ruled before humans claimed this world, and they think the child would be their herald. Aria stared at him. That's insane. Insane people are still dangerous. Thorn's voice came from the doorway. None of them had heard him enter. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, looking more exhausted than Aria had ever seen him. Especially when they're organized. How organized? Kyle asked. Organized enough to have infiltrated our supply chains. I've been tracking discrepancies in our food stores for the past week. Someone's been poisoning our grain reserves. Nothing fatal, yet, but enough to weaken us. Make us sick, slow our reaction times. Can we isolate the contaminated supplies? Already done, but it confirms what we suspected. Thorn's dark eyes found Aria. This isn't just about politics or power. There are people out there who genuinely believe you're carrying the end of the world, and they'll do anything to stop it. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Aria felt the weight of their gazes. 3 warlords who'd carved empires from blood and stone, all looking at her like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve, a problem with no good answer. She stood, ignoring the pain that lanced through her core. Then we show them they're wrong. How? Riven's tone was flat. We can't exactly parade you around in your condition. No, but we can prove I'm not dying. She moved to the map, studied the positions marked in red ink. Enemy encampments, supply routes, potential attack vectors. Seraphine wanted proof. So did the others. They all think I'm going to collapse any day now, that the child will kill me before it's born. It might, Kael said quietly, but it hasn't yet. She looked up at him. And every day I survive makes their prophecies look weaker. Every day I'm still standing is evidence that maybe, just maybe, they're wrong about everything else too. You want to use yourself as bait, Thorn said. Not a question. I want to use myself as proof. Aria straightened despite the pain. We invite them here. All of them. The Confederacy, the Northern clans. Whatever this cult is that thinks I'm summoning ancient horrors. We let them see me, talk to me, verify that I'm real and alive and not some political fiction. That's suicide. Riven's voice was ice. The moment they're inside these walls, they'll try to kill you. Maybe. Or maybe they'll realize that what they've been told is propaganda. She met his gaze. You said it yourself. They're afraid. Fear makes people irrational. But seeing me, talking to me, understanding that I'm just a woman trying to survive, that might change things. Or it might get you murdered in front of an audience of thousands. Kael moved closer. I won't allow it. You don't get to allow or disallow anything. The words came out sharper than she intended. This is my life, my choice, and I'm done hiding. You're also done thinking clearly. Riven's hands clenched into fists. The bond is draining you, affecting your judgment. You're not strong enough to... I'm strong enough to decide my own fate. The shout echoed off stone walls. Aria's hands shook. From anger or weakness, she couldn't tell. You've kept me locked in this tower for 12 days. Monitored my every breath, dictated what I eat, when I sleep, who I'm allowed to see. And I've cooperated because I understand the danger. But I will not be a prisoner forever. Better a prisoner than a corpse, Kael said. Not to me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Thorn laughed, low and rough. She's got you there. Riven whirled on him. This isn't funny. No, it's not. But she's right. Thorn pushed off the doorframe, moved into the room. We can't keep her locked up forever. Eventually we have to make a stand, show strength instead of hiding weakness. And if we're going to do that, better to do it on our terms than wait for them to breach the walls. It's too dangerous, Riven insisted. Everything is dangerous. Thorn's expression hardened. The question is whether we die cowering in a fortress or die proving we were never afraid in the first place. Kael was silent for a long moment. Then, if we do this, if we invite them here, we do it with conditions. Heavy guard presence, no weapons allowed in the inner courtyard, and at the first sign of trouble, we evacuate Aria immediately, non-negotiable. Aria wanted to argue, wanted to insist she didn't need protecting. But the pain flaring through her abdomen reminded her that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Agreed, she said. Riven looked between them, his jaw working. Finally, he exhaled slowly. This is the worst idea we've ever had. Probably, Kael agreed. And if it fails, we all die. Most likely. Another pause. Then Riven's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Well, at least we'll die doing something monumentally stupid together. Family bonding, Thorn said dryly. Shut up. The invitations went out at dawn. Messengers on fast horses, carrying sealed letters stamped with the combined sigils of all three warlords. The message was simple. Come. See for yourself. Bring witnesses. Bring proof. But leave your weapons at the gates. Responses came back within hours. The northern clans accepted immediately. Their chieftain, a woman named Valdis Ironhand, sent word that she'd arrive in 3 days with a delegation of 20. No weapons. No tricks. Just eyes and ears. The Confederacy took longer. Seraphine's reply was terse. I'll consider it. Which meant yes, but she wasn't happy about it. The cult, the ones who believed Aria was summoning ancient horrors, didn't respond at all, which was somehow more terrifying than a refusal. They'll come anyway, Thorn said, studying the empty space on the map where the cult's encampment should have been. People that fanatical don't pass up opportunities like this. They'll just come uninvited. Then we double the perimeter guards, Kael said. Triple them. I want eyes on every approach to this stronghold. Done. Thorn rolled up the map. But guards won't stop true believers, not if they think they're on a holy mission. Then we make the cost of that mission higher than they're willing to pay. The preparations consumed the next 2 days. The stronghold transformed from a military fortress into something closer to a diplomatic venue. The Great Hall was scrubbed clean, long tables arranged in a horseshoe pattern. Guard rotations were adjusted to maximize visible presence without appearing overtly hostile. Food stores were inventoried, tasted for poison, inventoried again. And through it all, Aria felt herself weakening. It was subtle at first, a stumble here, a moment of dizziness there. But by the second day, she couldn't hide it anymore. The pain that had been manageable was now constant, a low gnawing ache that never quite went away, punctuated by sharp spikes that left her gasping. The healers came more frequently. Their expressions grew more grim. How much longer? she asked one of them, an elderly woman named Mira who'd been tending battle wounds since before Aria was born. Mira's hand stilled on Aria's wrist, where she'd been checking her pulse. You want the truth? Always. 3 days? Maybe 4. The healer's voice was gentle, pitying. After that, the drain will be too severe. Even with the bond, your body won't be able to sustain both you and the child. And if we end it, you'd recover, fully. Within a month, you'd be back to normal strength. And if I don't? Mira's silence was answer enough. After the healer left, Aria sat alone in her chamber and let herself cry. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that, but from sheer, overwhelming exhaustion. She was so tired, tired of hurting, tired of being monitored, tired of being the problem everyone was trying to solve. She was tired of fighting. The thought terrified her more than anything else. A knock at the door, soft, tentative. Come in, she called, wiping her eyes. Kael entered, carrying a tray laden with food she had no appetite for. He set it on the table, then settled into the chair across from her. For a long moment, he just looked at her. You've been crying, he said finally. Astute observation. Do you want to talk about it? Not particularly. He nodded. Didn't push, just sat there, solid and steady, until the silence became comfortable instead of suffocating. I'm scared, Aria admitted. The words came out small, broken. I'm scared that I'm making the wrong choice, that I'm being selfish, that I'm going to get everyone killed because I'm too stubborn to admit when I'm beaten. You're not beaten. Kael's voice was quiet. You're standing. That's more than most people could manage. Standing isn't enough. No, but it's something. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You asked me once why we bonded with you, why we chose a human when there were stronger, more politically advantageous options. I remember. I told you it was strategic, a way to secure an alliance we needed. He paused. That was a lie. Aria's breath caught. What? We chose you because you were the first person we'd met in decades who wasn't afraid of us. Not because you were brave, you were terrified, but you were scared of us, not for us. You saw us as people, not weapons, and that mattered. His dark eyes held hers. It still matters, which is why I need you to understand something. If you want to go through with this meeting, we'll support you. If you want to hide until the end, we'll defend you. And if you want to end this pregnancy and save yourself, we'll grieve with you. But whatever you choose, make sure it's your choice, not ours, not the healer's, yours. Aria's throat was tight. And if my choice gets us all killed? Then we die knowing we let you live on your own terms. That's worth something. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the conviction in his words take root in her chest and push out the fear. But all she felt was tired. What if I don't know what I want anymore? She whispered. Kael stood, moved around the table, crouched beside her chair. His hand, rough with calluses and scars, covered hers. Then we wait until you do, however long that takes. The tears came again, but this time she didn't try to hide them. The northern clans arrived first. Aria watched from her tower window as the delegation rode through the gates, 20 warriors on massive war horses, all clad in furs and leather, weapons left in a pile outside as promised. At their head rode Valdis Ironhand, a woman built like a siege engine with silver braids and a face carved from stone. She doesn't look happy, Aria observed. She's never happy, Riven said from beside her. Valdis believes smiling is a sign of weakness, but she's honorable. If she gave her word to come unarmed, she meant it. And if she decides I'm a threat, then we have a fight on our hands. He glanced at her. How are you feeling? Like I'm about to vomit. Which was true. The pain had been steadily building all morning, and the prospect of facing a delegation of hostile strangers wasn't helping. You don't have to do this, Riven said. Again. He'd said it at least a dozen times since dawn. Yes, I do. He didn't argue, just offered his arm. Then let's go prove them wrong. The walk down to the great hall felt endless. Every step sent jolts of pain through her core. By the time they reached the bottom of the stairs, Aria was breathing hard, one hand pressed against her stomach, the other gripping Riven's arm hard enough to bruise. Kael met them at the entrance. Valdis is already seated. So are her advisors. They're Impatient. Then let's not keep them waiting. The great hall had been transformed. Torches blazed in iron sconces. The long tables gleamed with polish. Guards lined the walls. Enough to maintain order, not so many as to appear threatening. And at the center of it all, seated at a table that had hosted 1,000 negotiations, Valdis Ironhand waited. She stood when Aria entered. The movement was sharp, military. Her gray eyes swept over Aria from head to toe, cataloging weaknesses, assessing threats. When she spoke, her voice could have shattered ice. "You're the human. I'm Aria Vale." She moved to the table, forced herself to sit without grimacing. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't come for you." Valdis settled back into her chair. "I came to verify whether the rumors are true, whether a human is actually stupid enough to try carrying a hybrid to term." "I'm not trying, I'm doing it. Same difference. You'll be dead within a week." "Maybe. Maybe not." Valdis leaned forward. "I've seen hybrid births, girl. 3 of them. All ended the same way, screaming, blood, and corpses. The mothers always die. Always. What makes you think you're special?" "I don't think I'm special. I think the circumstances are different." "Because of the bond?" Valdis's lip curled. "You think some mystical connection will keep you alive when your organs start shutting down? When the child drains the last of your life force? That's not strength. That's delusion." Aria met her gaze. "Then why are you here? If you're so certain I'm going to die?" "Because if you somehow don't die, the child you birth will be the most dangerous thing to walk this world in 3 centuries, and I need to know whether it's a threat I can control or one I need to eliminate." The words hung in the air like drawn blades. "You want to kill my child," Aria said slowly. "I want to protect my people." Valdis's expression didn't soften. "A hybrid with that much power raised by 3 warlords who already control half the North? That's not a baby. That's a weapon waiting to be deployed. And I won't stand by while you forge the instrument of our destruction." "Then you're operating on the same fear that's driven every war in the last century." Aria's voice was steady despite the pain. "You see power you don't understand, and your first instinct is to destroy it. My first instinct is to survive. So is mine, which is why I'm asking you to set aside your fear and look at the facts." Aria straightened in her chair. "I'm still alive. Against every prediction, every prophecy, every historical precedent, I'm breathing, the bond is holding, the child is growing, and nothing catastrophic has happened." "Yet," Valdis said. "Yet," Aria agreed. "But doesn't that tell you something? Doesn't the fact that I've lasted this long suggest that maybe the old assumptions were wrong?" Valdis was silent for a long moment. Then, "Or it suggests that the disaster is just delayed, building slowly, waiting to explode when we're least prepared." "That's one interpretation. What's yours?" "That the world is changing, and we can either adapt or be crushed by it." Valdis studied her with those hard gray eyes. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. It was a harsh sound, like rocks grinding together, but genuine. "You've got spine, I'll give you that." She stood, paced to the window, stared out at the frozen courtyard. "My grandmother used to tell stories about the old world, before the territories fractured, before humans and others went to war over scraps of power. She said there was a time when both sides lived in balance, when hybrid births weren't death sentences but celebrations." "Do you believe her?" "I believe the world was different once. Whether it was better is debatable." Valdis turned back. "But I also believe that clinging to old fears keeps us trapped in old patterns, and maybe you're offering a way out." Hope fluttered in Aria's chest. "Then you'll support us?" "I'll withhold judgment, for now." Valdis moved back to the table. "But understand this. If that child shows even a hint of instability, if it threatens my people in any way, I will end it myself, and you along with it if necessary." "Understood." "Good." Valdis extended her hand. "Then we have an accord. Temporary. Conditional. But an accord nonetheless." Aria gripped her hand. The woman's grip was iron. The meeting lasted another hour. Questions were asked. Answers given. Valdis's advisors, stoic warriors who spoke rarely but watched everything, took notes in a language Aria didn't recognize. By the time they left, Aria was shaking from exhaustion and pain. But she'd done it. She'd faced Valdis Iron Hand and lived. 1 down, 2 to go. Well, the Confederacy arrived at sunset. Seraphine brought 100 soldiers this time. Not a delegation, an occupation force. They filled the stronghold's outer courtyard, their gleaming armor reflecting torchlight like a sea of fire. She's making a statement, Thorn observed from the battlements, showing us exactly what she can bring to bear if we refuse her terms. Then we make our own statement, Kael said. We don't flinch. Seraphine's entrance was theater. She swept into the great hall like a conquering queen, silver hair gleaming, amber eyes sharp enough to cut. Her advisors flanked her, 3 men and 2 women, all dressed in the Confederacy's formal regalia. She didn't wait for pleasantries. I'm told you survived your meeting with Valdis, Seraphine said, settling into her chair with practiced grace. Impressive. Most humans would have collapsed under her scrutiny. I'm not most humans, Aria replied. Clearly. Seraphine's gaze swept over her. You look worse than last time. Paler, weaker. The child is draining you faster. The child is growing, as children do. Normal children, yes. But this isn't normal. Seraphine leaned forward. I've had my scholars analyze the information your traitor leaked. The rate of deterioration is accelerating. In 3 days, 4 at most, you'll reach a tipping point. After that, no amount of power channeled through your bond will be enough. Aria's stomach twisted. Your point? My point is that time is running out, and I need to know whether you're willing to be reasonable before it's too late. Define reasonable. Surrender the child to Confederacy custody upon birth. We'll raise it in a secure facility, train it to control its power, ensure it never becomes a threat. In exchange, we guarantee your safety and the continued independence of this stronghold. You want to take my baby and lock it in a cage. I want to ensure the safety of millions of people who would be vulnerable if that child's power runs unchecked. Seraphine's voice was steel wrapped in silk. This isn't cruelty, Aria. It's pragmatism. It's slavery. It's protection. For whom? Aria's hands curled into fists. Not for my child. You'd imprison it from birth, teach it that its existence is a crime, ensure it never knows freedom or choice or anything resembling a normal life. And you call that protection? I call it necessary. Seraphine's expression hardened. You're young, naive. You think love and good intentions will be enough, but I've seen what unchecked power does. I've watched empires fall because someone believed they could control forces beyond their comprehension. I won't let that happen again. Then you're no different from the cult that wants to kill me. Aria leaned forward despite the pain. You both see a threat instead of a life, a weapon instead of a child, and you both think the answer is control or death, because those are the only rational options. No? Aria's voice dropped, went quiet. Dangerous. They're the easy options. The ones that let you sleep at night without having to question whether you're becoming the very thing you claim to fear. Seraphine's jaw tightened. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared at this human woman who should have been begging, who should have been grateful for any mercy offered, who was instead rejecting the Confederacy's protection like it was poison. You're making a mistake, Seraphine said finally. Maybe, but it's mine to make. Not if it endangers everyone else. Then everyone else will have to decide whether they trust me or kill me. But I won't hand over my child to satisfy their paranoia. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Seraphine stood slowly, deliberately. Then we have nothing more to discuss. The Confederacy's offer stands for 24 hours. After that, she smiled. It wasn't warm. After that, we proceed with alternative solutions. She swept from the hall, her advisors trailing behind like shadows. The silence that followed was crushing. Well, Thorn said eventually, that went poorly. Aria couldn't disagree. That night, the pain became unbearable. It started as it always did. A dull ache, manageable, almost ignorable. But within hours, it escalated into something monstrous, claws ripping through her insides, fire consuming her from within. She screamed, All three warlords came running. They found her doubled over on the floor, blood streaming from her nose, her hands pressed against her stomach like she could physically hold herself together through sheer force of will. "Get the healers!" Kale roared. Riven was already moving, his hands glowing with pale blue light as he channeled power through the bond. It helped. Barely. The pain receded from unbearable to merely agonizing. Thorn knelt beside her, gripped her face between his hands. "Look at me. Aria, look at me." She tried. The world kept slipping in and out of focus. "Stay awake," he said. "You have to stay awake." "Can't," she gasped. "Hurts too much." "I know. But if you lose consciousness now, we might not be able to pull you back." The healers arrived in a rush of movement and urgent whispers. Hands on her, checking pulse, temperature, examining the blood that wouldn't stop flowing. "It's happening," Mira said. The old healer's voice was grim. "The child is entering its final growth phase. It's pulling everything it can from her." "How long?" Riven demanded. "Hours? Maybe less." Mira met his gaze. "If you're going to make a decision, make it now." Aria felt consciousness slipping, the edges of her vision going dark. Then, something shifted. Deep inside where the child grew, something changed. The pulling sensation, that constant drain that had been slowly killing her, suddenly reversed. Power flooded back. Not hers. Not from the bond. From the child itself. Golden light exploded from Aria's body, so bright the healers stumbled back, shielding their eyes. It filled the room, warm and alive and utterly foreign. And then it stopped. The pain vanished. Aria gasped, drawing in a full breath for the first time in hours. Her hands moved to her stomach, expecting blood, expecting damage. Nothing. She was whole. "What just happened?" Kael's voice was rough with shock. "I don't know," Aria whispered. "But I think the child just saved me." Mira moved forward cautiously, hands glowing with diagnostic magic. She pressed her palm against Aria's abdomen, and her eyes went wide. "It's not draining anymore," the healer said slowly. "It's balancing, feeding power back into her to compensate for what it takes." "That's impossible," Riven said. "And yet..." Mira pulled her hand back, stared at it like it had betrayed her. "The child is sharing its own life force, creating a symbiotic relationship instead of a parasitic one." Silence filled the room. Then Aria started laughing, hysterical, relief and disbelief and sheer overwhelming joy. "It's not killing me," she said between gasps. "It's keeping me alive." But even as the words left her mouth, she felt it. Another heartbeat. And another. Not one child. 3. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. She looked up at the three warlords standing over her, Kyle, Riven, Thorn, and saw the same realization dawning in their eyes. "How many?" Kale asked hoarsely. "3," Aria whispered. "There are 3 of them." The world tilted. And outside, in the frozen darkness beyond the stronghold's walls, something ancient stirred, drawn by the golden light, hungry for what it promised. The real danger was just beginning. The real danger was just beginning. Aria felt it before she saw it, a wrongness in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. The golden light that had erupted from her body moments ago still hummed beneath her skin, warm and alive and completely foreign. 3 heartbeats pulsed inside her, distinct and separate, each one a small sun burning in her core. "Get her to the inner sanctum," Riven said, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. "Now!" Kael moved first, scooping Aria off the floor like she weighed nothing. She wanted to protest, to insist she could walk, but her legs were trembling too badly to support her weight. The golden light had healed her, yes, but it had also left her feeling hollowed out. Empty. "What's happening?" she managed, as Kyle carried her through corridors lit by torchlight. Guards snapped to attention as they passed, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright fear. "You just broadcast your location to everything within 100 miles, Thorn said from behind them. His hand rested on the knife at his belt, and his eyes scanned every shadow. That light, whatever it wasn't subtle. "The cult will have seen it," Riven added. "So will Seraphine's forces, and Valdis's scouts. They'll all know exactly where you are, and exactly how powerful those children are becoming." Aria's stomach dropped. How long do we have? Until they mobilize? Hours. Maybe less. Kael's arms tightened around her. Until they breach the walls? That depends on how desperate they are. They reached the inner sanctum, a windowless chamber deep in the stronghold's heart, carved from solid rock and reinforced with iron. Guards flanked the entrance, their faces grim. Inside, more torches blazed, casting dancing shadows across walls covered in ancient symbols. Kael set her down on a low couch. Mira was already there, her medical supplies spread across a table, her expression more troubled than Aria had ever seen it. 3 children, the healer said without preamble. All alive. All developing faster than anything I've ever documented. She moved to Aria's side, pressed her glowing hands against her abdomen. And they're sharing power, not just with you, with each other, creating a network of energy that's keeping all 4 of you alive. Is that normal? There's nothing normal about any of this. Mira pulled her hands back. But if I had to guess, I'd say the children are adapting, learning to survive in an environment that should kill them, which means they're intelligent, aware, and that terrifies me. Why? Aria asked, though she already knew the answer. Because intelligence can be corrupted, manipulated, used. Mira's voice was soft. And there are forces out there that would give anything to control that kind of power. Before Aria could respond, an explosion rocked the stronghold. The floor bucked beneath them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to wail. Thorn was already moving toward the door. That came from the eastern wall. They're here, Kael said. Not a question, a statement. Whoever they are, they're here. Riven's mouth blazed with pale blue light. Mira, stay with Aria. Don't open this door for anyone except us. He looked at Kael and Thorn. We need to know what we're facing. Wait. Aria tried to stand, but Mira's hand on her shoulder pushed her back down. You're staying here, the healer said firmly. You just survived something that should have killed you 3 times over. You need rest, not combat. I can fight. You can barely stand. Mira's expression softened. Let them protect you. That's what they do best. The 3 warlords were already moving toward the door. Kael paused at the threshold, looked back at Aria. Something passed between them, an understanding, a promise, a goodbye that neither wanted to voice. Then they were gone. The door slammed shut. Bolts slid home. And Aria was left alone with Mira and the sound of distant screams. Chup. The battle came faster than anyone expected. Aria could hear it through the thick stone walls. The clash of steel, the roar of flames, the thunder of boots on stone. Every few minutes, another explosion would shake the stronghold, sending fresh cascades of dust from the ceiling. What's happening out there? She asked for the 10th time. Mira didn't look up from where she was organizing medical supplies. Nothing good. That's not helpful. Neither is panicking. The healer's hands were steady, but Aria could see the tension in her shoulders. They'll hold. They always do. But even as she said it, another explosion rocked the sanctum. Closer this time. Much closer. Aria's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The 3 heartbeats pulsed steadily, calm despite the chaos outside. As if the children knew something she didn't. As if they were waiting. For what? The answer came in the form of screaming. It started distant, then grew rapidly louder. Not the screams of battle. Aria had heard plenty of those. This was different. Terror. Pure, primal terror. Then the screaming stopped. Silence fell like a guillotine. Mira froze, her hands hovering over a tray of surgical instruments. That's not good. What does it mean? It means they broke through. The healer moved to the door, pressed her ear against the wood. And whatever came through is killing everyone it finds. Aria's blood went cold. The warlords are probably fighting for their lives. Mira turned back to her. Which means we need to prepare for the possibility that they won't make it back. Don't say that. Someone has to. Mira moved back to the table, grabbed a wicked-looking scalpel. If something gets through that door, I want you to run. There's a passage behind the 3rd torch on the left wall. Twist it counterclockwise and push. It leads to the old catacombs. You can hide there until the door exploded inward, not opened, exploded. Splinters of wood and twisted metal flew across the room. Mira threw herself in front of Aria, raising a shimmering barrier of green light just in time to deflect the debris. Through the smoke and dust, a figure stepped into the sanctum. Tall, wrapped in black robes that seemed to absorb light. Face hidden behind a mask carved from bone. In one hand, a blade that dripped with blood that wasn't quite red. It shimmered, iridescent, like oil on water. "Found you?" the figure said. The voice was wrong, layered, like three people speaking in unison. The herald, the vessel, the beginning of everything. Aria scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. Mira's barrier flickered, weakening under whatever power the figure was radiating. "You can't have her," Mira said. Her voice shook, but she didn't move. "I won't let you." "You won't let me?" The figure laughed. It was a terrible sound. "You're a healer, old, weak. What exactly do you think you can do?" "More than you'd expect." Mira's hands blazed with green light. She thrust them forward, sending a lance of pure energy toward the intruder. It should have hit, should have burned through flesh and bone. Instead, the figure simply raised one hand. The energy dissipated like smoke. "Pathetic," the figure said, then moved. Too fast. Impossibly fast. One moment they were at the door, the next they were in front of Mira, that terrible blade rising. "No!" Aria screamed. The blade came down. Mira's barrier shattered like glass. The scalpel she'd been holding clattered to the floor. And the old healer, the woman who'd tended wounds and saved lives for longer than Aria had been alive, crumpled without a sound. Aria couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at Mira's body, at the spreading pool of that wrong-colored blood, at the figure now turning toward her with deliberate, terrible slowness. "Finally," the figure said, "no more interruptions." They reached for her, and something inside Aria snapped, not broke, snapped into place. Like a lock turning, a door opening, a switch being thrown. The golden light erupted again, but this time it wasn't gentle, wasn't healing, it was rage given form. Power condensed into a weapon that had been waiting for this exact moment. The figure stumbled backward, raising their arms to shield against the brilliance. "Impossible! You're not ready! You can't—" Aria didn't know what she was doing, didn't know how she was doing it. She just knew that she was done being afraid, done being the victim, done watching people die for her. The light expanded, filled the room, and where it touched the figure in black robes, flesh began to burn. Not with fire, with something worse, something that unmade, that erased, that reduced matter to ash and ash to nothing. The figure's screams joined Mira's silence, and then both were gone. The light faded. Aria collapsed to her knees, gasping, her hands pressed against the floor to keep from falling completely. The sanctum was destroyed, walls scorched black, the air thick with the smell of burning. But she was alive, and the 3 heartbeats inside her pulsed stronger than ever. She didn't know how long she knelt there. Minutes, hours. Time had lost meaning. When the door, or what remained of it, scraped open, she couldn't even lift her head to look. "Aria," Kyl's voice, rough with exhaustion and something else. Fear. "Aria, can you hear me?" She managed a nod. Strong hands lifted her, cradled her. She finally looked up and found all 3 warlords standing over her. They were covered in blood and soot, their armor dented and torn, but alive. All of them alive. "What happened here?" Riven asked. His ice-blue eyes swept the ruined sanctum, landed on the scorch marks. The absence where the figure had been, the body that had been Mira. "They came for me," Aria whispered. "An assassin. Cult, I think. They killed Mira, and I did something. I don't know what, but it was—" "We saw the light," Thorn interrupted. "From the battlements. The entire eastern section of the stronghold lit up like the sun had fallen to earth." He looked at her differently now, warily. "That was you?" "It was the children." Aria's hand moved to her stomach. "They protected me. They killed for me." The 3 warlords exchanged glances. Aria couldn't read the expressions on their faces, but she could guess. Fear, concern, the realization that everything had changed. "The attack?" she asked. "What happened?" "Cult forces," Kyle said. "Fanatics. They threw themselves at our walls like they didn't care about dying, because they didn't. They were buying time for their assassin to get to you. He paused. We stopped most of them, but not before they breached the eastern defenses. How many did we lose? 43? Riven's voice was flat. Guards, mostly. A few civilians who got caught in the crossfire. 43 people. Dead because someone wanted her children. The guilt was crushing. This is my fault, Aria said. If we hadn't... Stop. Kyle's grip on her tightened. This isn't on you. These people chose violence. They chose fanaticism over reason. You're just trying to survive. By killing them. By defending yourself. He met her eyes. There's a difference. Was there? Aria wasn't sure anymore. They carried her back to her chambers, the ones in the tower, which had somehow survived the assault intact. As they walked, Aria could see the damage. Walls cratered by explosions, bodies being carried on stretchers, survivors sitting in corners, staring at nothing. The stronghold felt smaller, more fragile, like one more push would bring it all crashing down. In her room, they laid her on the bed. Kale remained, standing guard by the door. Riven disappeared to coordinate cleanup efforts. Thorn stayed long enough to check the windows, the locks, the hidden passages Aria hadn't known existed. They'll come again, Thorn said. Not a question. Yes, Aria replied. And next time? Next time I'll be ready. Thorn studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. He moved toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be worse. He left before she could ask what he meant. Kael settled into the chair by her bedside. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, necessary, a chance to breathe without having to pretend everything was fine. What you did in the sanctum, Kael said eventually, that power. Have you felt it before? No, never. Aria stared at the ceiling. It was like the children knew I was in danger, like they reached into my body and pulled out something I didn't know was there. And now? Now I can still feel it, waiting, just beneath my skin. She looked at him. Does that scare you? Yes, he said honestly. But not the way you think. I'm not scared of what you might do. I'm scared of what that power might cost you. Power like that, it doesn't come free. It takes something every time you use it. What if I don't have a choice? Then you pay the price, same as everyone else. He leaned forward. But you don't have to pay it alone. That's what the bond is for. That's what we're for. Aria felt tears prickling at her eyes. Mira's dead because of me. Mira's dead because a fanatic put a blade through her heart. That's not on you. It feels like it is. I know. His voice was gentle. But guilt won't bring her back. And it won't protect you from the next attack. All it does is make you hesitate when you should act. Is that what you do? Just push down the guilt and keep going? Kale's expression darkened. I carry every death I've caused, every order I've given that led to someone's end. The guilt doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it without letting it break you. He paused. And you hope that in the end, the lives you saved outnumber the ones you took. Do they? For you? He didn't answer. Well, dawn came too soon. Aria woke to shouting in the courtyard below. She dragged herself to the window, her body aching from exhaustion and the after effects of whatever she'd done in the sanctum. Below, chaos reigned. The stronghold's main gates stood open, and streaming through them, not attacking, not invading, just walking in like they owned the place, were soldiers, hundreds of them, wearing Seraphine's colors. Aria's heart stuttered. She grabbed the nearest cloak, threw it over her nightclothes, and ran. She found the confrontation in the great hall. Seraphine stood at the center, flanked by 20 guards, facing down Riven and Thorn. Kael was nowhere to be seen. Don't care about your protocols, Seraphine was saying, her voice sharp as broken glass. The cult attacked you last night. They'll attack again tonight, and tomorrow night, and every night after that until they accomplish their goal. You need reinforcements, and I'm providing them. We didn't ask for your help, Riven said coldly. You didn't have to. I'm giving it anyway. Seraphine's amber eyes flicked past him, landed on Aria as she entered. Ah, the woman of the hour. I trust you survived last night's excitement? No thanks to you. Aria moved to stand beside Riven. Where were your forces when the cult was battering down our walls? Preparing for exactly this scenario, Seraphine gestured to her guards. I'm not your enemy, Aria. I'm your best chance at survival. The cult knows where you are now. They've seen what your children can do, and they will not stop until you and those children are ash. Unless you accept help. Help? Thorn's laugh was bitter. You mean occupation. The moment we let your soldiers in, you control this stronghold. I control 300 trained warriors who are willing to die protecting a woman they've never met. That's worth something, isn't it? Only if we trust you, Aria said, which we don't. Seraphine's expression hardened. Then you're fools. All of you. The cult has already proven they can breach your defenses. How long before they send 50 assassins instead of one? How long before they poison your water supply, or infiltrate your guards, or simply starve you out? You're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and running out of time. We've survived worse, Riven said. Have you? Seraphine's voice dropped. Have you survived 3 armies converging on a single position? Because that's what's coming. The cult isn't working alone anymore. They've allied with the northern clans. Yes, your precious Valdez has decided that eliminating the threat is more important than honor. And they've convinced several smaller factions to join them. By my estimate, you have 2 days before 15,000 soldiers arrive at your gates. 2 days, and you think you can hold against that? The silence that followed was crushing. Why are you telling us this? Aria asked. If you've come to help, why lead with threats? Because you need to understand the stakes. Seraphine moved closer, and for the first time Aria saw genuine concern in those amber eyes. I don't want you dead, Aria. I want those children under control before they become weapons that destroy us all. But if the choice is between that and letting fanatics tear this continent apart, I'll choose control. Every time. Then we're at an impasse, Aria said. No. We're at a decision point. Seraphine's gaze swept across the 3 of them. Accept my help. Let my soldiers reinforce your defenses. Prove to me that you can control what's growing inside you, or refuse, and we all die when the armies come. And if we accept, Riven asked, what are your terms? Simple. I station my forces here. They answer to me, not you. In exchange, they defend this stronghold as if it were Confederacy territory. When the children are born, we negotiate custody based on their demonstrated stability. If they're controllable, they stay with you. If not, you take them anyway, Aria finished. Yes. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Aria looked at Riven, then at Thorn, reading the calculation in their eyes. They were considering it, actually considering surrendering control to the woman who threatened them less than 24 hours ago. No, Aria said. Both men turned to stare at her. Aria, Riven started. I said no. She stepped forward, putting herself between Seraphine and the warlords. You want to help? Fine. Station your soldiers outside the stronghold. They can reinforce the outer perimeter. But they don't come inside. They don't take positions on our walls. And they sure as hell don't get to dictate terms about my children. Seraphine's expression was unreadable. That's not enough. It's all you're getting. Aria's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Because here's what you don't understand, Lady Seraphine. I don't need your protection. I needed it yesterday, maybe. But after what happened last night, after I felt what these children can do, she placed her hand over her stomach. I'm not the weakness you think I am. I'm not the victim who needs saving, and I'm damn sure not going to trade one cage for another just because you're afraid. You should be afraid too. I am. But I'm more afraid of what happens if I give up control now, if I let fear dictate every choice, if I prove to my children, before they're even born, that the world sees them as monsters. Aria's eyes blazed. So, no, you can keep your soldiers, keep your terms, and keep your fear. We'll handle this ourselves. For a long, tense moment, Seraphine said nothing, just studied Aria with those sharp amber eyes, as if seeing her for the first time. Then she laughed, short, sharp, genuine. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the stupidest. Seraphine shook her head. Possibly both. Does that mean you're leaving? It means I'm adjusting my approach. Seraphine gestured to her guards. They immediately began filing toward the exit, My forces will establish a perimeter 500 yards from your walls. We'll defend the approaches, but we won't enter your stronghold without invitation. Consider it a show of good faith. Why the change of heart? Because you reminded me of someone. Seraphine paused at the door. My daughter. She had your same stubborn refusal to be controlled, your same belief that courage could overcome impossible odds. A shadow passed over her face. She died in childbirth, trying to deliver a hybrid child that her lover insisted she could survive. She believed him. Right up until the end. The air went out of the room. I'm sorry, Aria said quietly. So am I. Seraphine's voice was hollow. Which is why I'm trying to save you from her fate. But I can see now that you won't be saved. You'll die like she did, believing until your last breath that love is enough. That hope trumps biology. That wanting something badly enough makes it true. Maybe I will die, Aria said. But at least I'll die fighting for something I believe in. Can you say the same? Seraphine's jaw tightened. For a moment, Aria thought she might lash out, might order her guards to seize her, might end this standoff with violence. Instead, she simply nodded. 2 days, Seraphine said. When the armies come, my offer expires. After that, you're on your own. She left. The moment the door closed behind her, Aria's legs gave out. Riven caught her before she hit the floor. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen, he said. I know. Aria's voice shook. Where's Kael? Coordinating with our scouts. The reports about the armies, if Seraphine's right, we have maybe 48 hours before the door burst open again. This time it was Kael, moving fast, his expression grim. We have a problem. Another one? Thorn asked. The traitors. The ones we arrested after the first leak. Kael's jaw worked. They're all dead. Poisoned in their cells sometime last night during the attack. Aria's blood went cold. Someone didn't want them talking. Which means there's still at least one more traitor in the stronghold. Kael looked at Riven. And they're close enough to access the holding cells, close enough to move during chaos without being questioned. How many people have that kind of access? Aria asked. Too many. Riven's expression was murderous. Guards, officers, anyone with the right clearance could have done it. Then we lock down, Thorn said. No one moves without escort. No one enters restricted areas. We turn this place into a prison until we root out whoever— That won't work, Kael interrupted. We need mobility, flexibility. If we lock down completely, we can't respond to external threats, and there are plenty of those. Then what do we do? Aria demanded. The three warlords looked at each other. No answers. Just grim acceptance that they were running out of options. We do what we always do, Riven said finally. We survive. We adapt. And we make whoever's working against us regret every breath they've taken. It wasn't much of a plan. But it was all they had. The next 30 hours passed in a blur of preparation and paranoia. Guards were doubled, then tripled. Supply lines were checked and rechecked for tampering. Anyone who'd been near the holding cells was interrogated, gently at first, then less so when gentle didn't produce results. No one confessed. No new traitors were found, which meant the threat remained. Hidden, waiting. Aria spent most of that time in her chambers, forbidden from moving without at least 2 guards and one of the warlords. It should have felt safe. Instead, it felt like being buried alive. On the second morning after Seraphine's ultimatum, the scouts returned. Aria was summoned to the war room, a circular chamber at the stronghold's peak where maps covered every surface and tactical markers indicated known enemy positions. All 3 warlords were there. So were a dozen officers, their faces carved from stone. They're here, Kael said without preamble. 2 miles out and closing, 15,000 strong, just like Seraphine estimated. Maybe more. Aria moved to the map, saw the red markers forming a noose around the stronghold. When will they attack? They already are. Riven pointed to the western markers. Probing attacks on the outer defenses, testing our responses, looking for weaknesses. Seraphine's forces? Holding the perimeter as promised, but they're outnumbered 3 to 1. They won't last long if the main force commits. How long do we have? Until what? Thorn asked. Until they breach the walls? A day. Maybe 2 if we're lucky. Until they starve us out? Weeks. But that assumes they have the patience, which I doubt. Aria studied the map, the markers, the impossible odds. Then we don't wait for them to breach. We go out. Silence. Excuse me? Riven's voice was very quiet, very controlled, which meant he was furious. We go out, Aria repeated, not to fight, to talk, to show them that I'm not hiding, that I'm not afraid, that the person they're so terrified of is just a woman who wants to live. That's suicide, Kael said flatly. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to end this without everyone dying. She looked at each of them in turn. Seraphine was right about one thing. We can't win a straight fight. We're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and running out of time, but we have one advantage they don't. What's that? Me. Aria placed her hand over her stomach. They're here because they're afraid of what I'm carrying, so let's show them there's nothing to fear. Let's prove that these children aren't weapons, that they're not the end of the world, that everything they believe is based on lies and propaganda. And if they don't believe you, Thorn asked, then at least I tried. Aria's voice was steady. At least I gave them a chance to see the truth before they destroyed everything. The warlords exchanged glances. Aria could see the argument forming, the dozen reasons why this was a terrible idea, the logical, rational objections that made perfect sense. But underneath all that, she also saw acceptance, because they knew she was right. This wasn't a fight they could win with swords. We do this. We do it on our terms, Riven said finally. Heavy guard presence, controlled environment. At the first sign of violence, we extract you immediately. Agreed, Aria said. And if they kill you anyway? Kael's voice was rough. If we walk out there and they decide murder is easier than listening? Then I die knowing I tried to save everyone instead of just myself. Kael's jaw worked. Then he nodded once, sharply. We leave at dawn, Riven said. That gives us time to coordinate with Seraphine's forces and establish a neutral ground. Somewhere visible but defendable. The northern plateau, Thorn suggested. Open ground, easy sight lines, hard to ambush. Good. Make the arrangements. Riven looked at Aria. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be the longest day of your life. She didn't argue, because she knew he was right. Beat. Aria didn't sleep. She tried. Lay in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, feeling the 3 heartbeats pulsing inside her, listening to the distant sounds of preparation, boots on stone, weapons being sharpened, voices raised in command. Around midnight, she gave up and moved to the window. The stronghold sprawled below her, lit by torches and braziers. Beyond the walls, she could see the glow of campfires stretching to the horizon. 15,000 people who wanted her dead. Or did they? How many of those soldiers were true believers? How many were just following orders? How many would actually kill her if given the chance, versus how many would hesitate? She'd never know unless she tried. A knock at the door, soft, tentative. Come in, she called. Thorn entered, carrying 2 cups of something that steamed in the cold air. He offered one to her. What is it? She asked. Spiced wine, helps with the nerves. She took a sip. It burned going down, but the warmth was welcome. Can't sleep either? Never could before a big fight. He settled into the chair by the window, stared out at the campfires. Used to drive Kael insane. He'd be snoring within minutes while I'd be up all night running scenarios. And Riven? Riven doesn't sleep. He just closes his eyes and thinks very intensely for 8 hours. Despite everything, Aria laughed. The sound surprised her. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping wine and watching the enemy prepare. You know this is probably going to end badly, Thorn said eventually. I know. And you're doing it anyway. I am. Why? He looked at her. And don't give me the noble answer about saving everyone. I want the real reason. Aria thought about it, really thought about it. Because I'm tired of being afraid, she said finally. Tired of letting other people's fear dictate my choices. Tired of hiding and hoping someone else solves the problem. She met his gaze. If I'm going to die, I want it to be on my feet, fighting for something I believe in, not cowering in a tower waiting for the end. Thorn nodded slowly. That's a good reason. Is it enough? Has to be. It's all we've got. He stood, moved to the door, paused with his hand on the latch. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. Stubborn, reckless, occasionally stupid, but brave. Thanks? Don't mention it. He opened the door. Try to get some rest. Dawn comes early. He left. Aria returned to the window, finished her wine, watched the campfires burn, and waited for morning. Itas. Dawn broke cold and clear. Aria dressed in simple clothes, no armor, no weapons, nothing that could be construed as threatening, just leather and wool, practical and unadorned. The warlords met her in the courtyard. They were dressed for war, full armor, weapons at hand, but their expressions were carefully neutral. Around them, 200 guards formed up in tight ranks. Last chance to change your mind, Kael said. Not changing my mind. Didn't think so. He gestured to a horse. We ride together. You don't leave our sight. The procession moved out slowly, through the gates, past Seraphine's forces, who watched with inscrutable expressions. Onto the northern plateau where Aria's breath caught. The armies were waiting, not attacking, just there. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers arranged in perfect formation, banners snapping in the wind, weapons gleaming in the morning sun, and at their front, mounted on a massive warhorse, Valdis Ironhand. The northern clan chieftain rode forward alone, stopped 50 feet from Aria's position. So, Valdis called across the distance, you came. I came to talk, Aria called back. Talk. Valdis's laugh was bitter. The time for talking ended when you refused every reasonable offer, when you proved you cared more about your pride than the safety of millions, when you demonstrated that you're willing to birth monsters into a world that can't control them. They're not monsters, Aria said. They're children. Children who killed a trained assassin without lifting a finger. Children who radiate power that can be felt for miles. Children who are, what did our seers say? An affront to the natural order. Valdis's expression hardened. You're not here to talk, Aria Vale. You're here to surrender. So do it. Give us the children when they're born, and we'll let you live. Refuse, and we burn this stronghold to the ground with everyone in it. No. The word echoed across the plateau. Valdis's eyes narrowed. Then you've chosen death. I've chosen to fight for my children's right to exist. Aria dismounted. Kael immediately moved to stop her, but she waved him off. She walked forward on foot, closing the distance between herself and Valdis. You talk about them like they're weapons, like they're things to be controlled or eliminated, but they're alive, they're aware, and they're trying to survive just like everyone else. By killing, by defending. Aria stopped 10 feet from Valdis's horse, close enough to see the doubt in the chieftain's eyes. That assassin came to murder me, to cut my children out of my body while they were still developing. What would you have done in their place? What would any child do when their mother is threatened? Valdis's jaw worked. That's different. How? Because... Valdis stopped, started again. Because they're hybrids. Because they shouldn't exist. Because you're afraid. Aria's voice was gentle. And I understand that. I'm afraid too. But fear can't be the foundation of every decision we make. At some point, we have to choose trust over terror, hope over hate. We have to believe that the future can be different than the past. Pretty words. Valdis's voice was cold. But words won't change what you're carrying. No. But maybe seeing will. Aria placed her hand over her stomach. You want proof? Fine, I'll give you proof. The children, they're not draining me anymore. They're sustaining me, creating a balance that shouldn't be possible. Which means maybe everything you think you know about hybrids is wrong. Maybe... She never finished the sentence, because that's when the world exploded. Fire erupted from the ranks behind Valdis, not from the soldiers. From something else. Something that had been hiding among them. The cult. They'd infiltrated the northern clans, hidden themselves among Valdis's forces, and now they were attacking everything in sight. Chaos erupted, soldiers screamed, horses reared, Steel rang against steel as allies turned on each other, unable to tell friend from foe. Kyle was shouting something, but Aria couldn't hear over the roar of flames and screams. She turned to run back to her guards, and came face to face with another figure in black robes. The bone mask. The shimmering blade. Another assassin. "Found you," they said. The blade came down, and Aria's world went golden. The light erupted from her core, not slowly this time, not building like before, but instantaneous. A flash of pure energy that turned the frozen plateau into daylight. The assassin's blade stopped mid-arc, suspended in air as if caught by invisible hands. Then it shattered. The metal didn't just break, it dissolved. Fragments turning to dust, dust turning to nothing, until there was no weapon at all, just empty air and the assassin's shocked gasp behind their bone mask. Aria didn't think, didn't plan, she just moved. Her hand shot forward, palm connecting with the assassin's chest. Golden light poured through the contact point like water through a broken dam. The figure stumbled backward, arms windmilling, and hit the ground hard enough to crack stone. They didn't get up. Around her, the chaos continued. Cult members were carving through Valdis's soldiers with terrifying efficiency. Fire and steel and screams filled the air, but Aria barely registered it. She was too busy staring at her own hands, at the golden light still dancing across her fingers like living flame. "What did I just do?" she whispered. "Something impossible." Kael materialized at her side, his sword dripping blood. "And something you need to do again, now," he pointed. 3 more cult members were pushing through the melee, their robes billowing, their weapons raised, all heading straight for her. Aria's instinct screamed to run, to hide, to let the warlords handle this. But something else, something deeper, whispered differently. "Stand, fight, show them." She planted her feet, raised her hands, and let the golden light flow. It came easier this time, like opening a door she'd walked through before. The power surged from her center, through her arms, and exploded outward in a wave that hit the 3 cultists like a physical force. They flew backward, crashed into their own allies, didn't get up. The fighting around her stuttered, stopped. Thousands of eyes turned to stare at the human woman standing in the center of a golden aura, her hands blazing with power that shouldn't exist. Valdis was the first to speak. "What are you?" Aria didn't answer, couldn't answer, because she didn't know anymore. The golden light faded and exhaustion hit her like a sledgehammer. She swayed. Kael caught her before she fell, his arm around her waist, supporting her weight. "I've got you," he murmured. "Stay conscious. We're not out of this yet." He was right. The cultists were regrouping, and despite what she'd just done, there were still dozens of them scattered through the ranks, too many to fight alone. But then something unexpected happened. Valdis dismounted, walked across the blood-soaked ground until she stood directly in front of Aria. Her gray eyes were unreadable. "You just saved my soldiers," the chieftain said slowly. "The cultists were cutting through them like wheat, and you stopped it." "I stopped 3 of them," Aria said. Her voice was weak, shaking. "There are more. I can see that." Valdis looked over her shoulder at the chaos behind her, then back to Aria. "Why? Why what? Why save them? These are the people who came to kill you, who called for your death, who would have burned you alive if given the chance." Valdis's expression was carved from stone. "Why protect your enemies?" Aria met her gaze. "Because they're not my enemies. They're afraid, manipulated, being used by people who want chaos." She paused, gathering strength. "And because if I'm asking you to believe my children aren't monsters, I have to prove I'm not one either." Silence stretched between them. Then Valdis did something Aria never expected. She knelt, not fully, just one knee touching the frozen ground, a gesture of respect from someone who gave it rarely. "I was wrong about you," Valdis said, loud enough for the soldiers around them to hear. "About what you are, what you're capable of." She stood. "My forces will stand down, and we will help you root out the remaining cultists. Consider it payment for a debt. You don't owe me. I owe you my soldiers' lives. In my culture, that's not a small thing." Valdis turned to her commanders. "Spread the word. Anyone wearing those black robes is an enemy. Cut them down. No mercy. The northern clans surged forward with renewed purpose. This time, they weren't fighting Aria's guards. They were fighting alongside them. Thorn appeared through the chaos, his knives dripping. Well, didn't see that coming. Neither did I, Aria admitted. Can you do that trick again? He gestured to where the golden light had been. Because we've got maybe 20 more cultists scattered through the ranks, and traditional methods are taking too long. I don't know. It just happens when I'm threatened. Then let's get you threatened. Thorn grabbed her arm, gently but firmly. Kael, take the east quadrant. Riven's already engaging on the west. I'll keep Aria mobile and see if we can flush out the rest of these fanatics. That's a terrible plan, Kael said. You have a better one? Kael didn't. He just gripped Aria's shoulder once, a silent promise to stay close, and plunged back into the fighting. Thorn pulled her through the chaos with surprising gentleness. They didn't run. Aria couldn't manage that in her condition, but they moved with purpose. Every time a black-robed figure emerged from the crowd, Aria felt that now familiar surge of protective fury. The golden light came each time. Not always as strong, not always as controlled, but enough. Enough to push back attackers, enough to shield Thorn when 3 cultists converged on them simultaneously. Enough to prove to everyone watching that she wasn't helpless. By the time the last cultist fell, the sun was high overhead and Aria could barely stand. Thorn was supporting most of her weight, his arm around her waist, murmuring encouragement that she couldn't quite process through the exhaustion. How many? She managed. 17. Thorn's voice held something like awe. You took down 17 cult assassins, most of them without breaking a sweat. I'm sweating plenty, Aria muttered. Figure of speech. He guided her to a flat rock, helped her sit. Around them, the battlefield was transforming. Bodies were being collected. Wounded were being tended. And soldiers from 3 different armies, who'd been trying to kill each other an hour ago, were working side by side. Seraphine arrived on horseback, her silver hair windswept, her expression inscrutable. She dismounted, studied Aria for a long moment. You're full of surprises, the Confederacy leader said. Not by choice. No, I imagine not. Seraphine crouched to eye level. That power you demonstrated, the golden light, is it always defensive? I don't know. I've only used it twice. 3 times, Thorn corrected, if you count what happened in the sanctum. 3 times, Seraphine repeated, and each time you were protecting yourself or others, never attacking unprovoked. I'm not a weapon, Aria said. No, you're something more interesting, Seraphine stood. You're a woman who refuses to be a victim, who turns defensive instincts into offensive capabilities, who makes allies out of enemies through sheer force of will and stubborn courage. She paused. My daughter had that quality too. I wish I'd appreciated it while she lived. The admission hung in the cold air. I'm sorry for your loss, Aria said quietly. So am I. Every day. Seraphine's expression hardened back to its usual mask. But self-pity won't change what's happening here. The cult is broken, scattered. They'll regroup eventually, but not before we can consolidate position. The question is, what happens now? Now? Aria looked across the plateau, at Valdis directing her soldiers with sharp gestures, at Kael and Riven coordinating with Confederacy officers, at the impossible alliance that had formed in blood and fire. Now we figure out how to make this last longer than today. Optimistic. Realistic. If this coalition falls apart the moment the immediate threat is gone, we've solved nothing. The fear comes back, the paranoia, the certainty that my children are threats that need eliminating. Aria forced herself to stand, ignoring Thorn's steadying hand. We need something permanent, a treaty, an agreement, proof that cooperation works better than conflict. Seraphine studied her. You want to turn a battlefield alliance into political structure. I want to give everyone a reason to choose peace over murder. Is that so strange? In this world? Yes. But Seraphine's lips quirked in something that might have been a smile. But perhaps that's what makes it worthwhile. Come, if we're going to negotiate treaties, we should do it somewhere with fewer corpses. The makeshift war council convened in a large command tent that Seraphine's forces erected with impressive efficiency. Inside, representatives from all three factions gathered around a map-covered table. Valdis arrived first, still wearing battle-stained armor, her silver braids coming loose from their warrior's knot. She nodded to Aria, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable 24 hours ago. Seraphine took the head of the table. Aria sat to her right, with Kael, Riven, and Thorn flanking her. A show of united strength. Let's be clear about what happened today, Seraphine began without preamble. The cult infiltrated all our forces. They played on our fears and nearly turned us against each other. If Aria hadn't demonstrated that the power we all fear can be controlled, directed, used for protection instead of destruction, we'd still be killing each other. The question, Valdis said, is whether that demonstration was a fluke or something sustainable. All eyes turned to Aria. She took a breath. I don't know, she admitted. I don't understand how this power works. I don't know if it'll get stronger or weaker as the children develop. I can't promise it'll always be defensive or that I'll always maintain control. Then how can we trust? One of Valdis's advisors started. Because I'm being honest. Aria's voice cut through the interruption. I could lie. Tell you I have perfect control. That there's no risk. That everything will be fine. But that's what the cult does. They deal in certainties and absolutes. I'm offering you the truth. This is new. It's dangerous. And I'm learning as I go. But I'm also offering proof that it can be used for good. That these children aren't the apocalypse everyone fears. Proof from one battle, the advisor persisted. That's not enough. Then what would be enough? Aria leaned forward. How many times do I have to defend people who want me dead before you believe I'm not a threat? How many lives do I have to save? How much pain do I have to endure to prove I'm worth keeping alive? The advisor had no answer. Riven spoke into the silence. We're proposing a monitored period, 6 months after the children are born. During that time, representatives from all factions will have access to the stronghold. They can observe, document, verify that the children are being raised safely and that their power is controlled. And if it's not? Valdis asked. Then we reconvene and discuss next steps, Kael said. But we make those decisions based on evidence, not fear, not prophecy, not centuries-old assumptions that may no longer apply. You're asking us to gamble the safety of millions on a hope, Seraphine said. No, Aria corrected. I'm asking you to gamble on proof, on what you saw today, on the fact that when given the choice between hiding and helping, I chose to help, even when it would have been easier, safer, to let your soldiers die. Seraphine's amber eyes narrowed. And what do you get out of this arrangement? The chance to raise my children without having to murder everyone who disagrees with me. Aria's voice was steady. The opportunity to prove that the future doesn't have to be built on the same fears that destroyed the past. And maybe, if we're very lucky, the beginning of something better. The tent fell silent except for the sound of wind against canvas. Then Valdis spoke. I'll agree, on 3 conditions. Name them, Riven said. First, monthly reports, detailed, no omissions. We need to know how the children are developing, what powers they manifest, any incidents of instability. Agreed, Aria said. Second, if at any point the children demonstrate uncontrolled aggression, if they hurt someone unprovoked, the monitoring period ends and we move immediately to containment protocols. Aria's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Agreed, but we define unprovoked very carefully. I won't let you twist self-defense into aggression. Fair, Valdis glanced at Seraphine. Third condition. The Confederacy and Northern clans jointly establish a rapid response force. If something goes wrong, truly wrong, we need the ability to act quickly. A standing army aimed at my children, Aria said flatly. A precaution aimed at everyone's survival, Valdis corrected, including yours. If another cult faction emerges, or if hostile forces target the stronghold, you'll need backup. Consider it insurance. It was a prison disguised as protection. But Aria could also see the logic, and the alternative, outright war, was worse. Agreed, she said, as long as that force remains outside our borders, unless explicitly invited. Seraphine's turn. She steepled her fingers, studied Aria with those sharp amber eyes. I have only one condition. When the children are old enough, say 10 years, they receive formal education and power control from Confederacy instructors. Not imprisonment, not indoctrination, just training to ensure they can manage their abilities without hurting themselves or others. No, Aria said immediately. Ariason? Riven started. I said no. She turned to face Seraphine directly. You want to send instructors to teach them? Fine. We'll host them at the stronghold, but my children don't leave. They don't get shipped off to Confederacy schools where they'll be isolated and studied like specimens. They stay with their family. Seraphine's expression was unreadable. You don't trust us. I don't trust anyone who's threatened to take my children away. Prove you can work with us, really work with us, not just manage us, and maybe that changes. But for now, they stay home. A long pause. Then Seraphine nodded. Acceptable. We'll send instructors to you, starting when the children turn 5. Non-negotiable. 5 years old for basic training, 10 for advanced, Aria countered. And I approve every instructor before they set foot in my stronghold. Deal. The word hung in the air like a binding spell. Valdis extended her hand across the table. Then we have an accord. Fragile. Conditional. But an accord nonetheless. Seraphine placed her hand over Valdis's. Agreed. Aria added hers to the pile. Felt Kael, Riven, and Thorn's hands join. A circle of alliance forged in blood and desperation. To an uncertain future, Valdis said. May we all live to regret it. Cheerful, Thorn muttered, but no one pulled their hand away. The formalities took another 2 hours. Treaties were drafted in triplicate. Boundaries were established. Communication protocols were negotiated. By the time everything was signed and witnessed, the sun was setting and Aria felt like she'd run a marathon. Kael escorted her from the tent. Outside, the battlefield had been transformed into a temporary camp. Soldiers from 3 armies mingled warily, sharing food and stories, trying to reconcile the fact that their enemies of yesterday were their allies of today. You did it, Kael said quietly. You actually pulled off the impossible. We did it, Aria corrected. I was just the catalyst. Don't sell yourself short. What you did today, standing in front of thousands of people who wanted you dead and offering them peace instead of violence, that took more courage than anything I've seen in 30 years of war. Aria leaned against him, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. I'm terrified, Kael. This alliance is held together with spit and hope. One wrong move and it all falls apart. Then we don't make wrong moves. His arm came around her shoulders, steady, supportive. And if it does fall apart, we adapt. Same as always. They walked back toward the stronghold in comfortable silence. Around them, soldiers called out greetings, some respectful, some curious, none hostile. It was a start. Back in her chambers, Aria finally allowed herself to collapse. The exhaustion she'd been fighting all day crashed over her like a wave. She barely made it to the bed before her legs gave out. Mira's replacement, a younger healer named Kara, with gentle hands and worried eyes, was already waiting. She conducted a quick examination, checking pulse and temperature and the steady rhythm of the 3 heartbeats. They're stable, Kara reported. Actually more than stable. The power exchange between you and the children has strengthened. Whatever happened today, it didn't harm them. Good. Aria's eyes were already closing. That's good. Get some rest, Kara said. You've earned it. Aria slept. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't dream of darkness and clawing things. She dreamed of golden light and 3 small faces she'd never seen, but somehow knew. She woke to voices in the outer chamber, urgent, concerned. Aria dragged herself from bed, wrapped a robe around her shoulders, and stumbled to the door. Pulled it open to find all 3 warlords in heated discussion with a messenger she didn't recognize. What's wrong? She asked. They turned. Riven's expression was grim. We have a situation. Another attack? No, a request. He gestured to the messenger. From the southern territories. Word of what happened today has already spread. And apparently there are others. Aria's stomach dropped. Others? Other women carrying hybrid children, 5 confirmed cases, maybe more. Riven's ice-blue eyes were troubled. They're asking for protection, for the same monitoring program we established, for proof that survival is possible. The implications hit Aria like a physical blow. She wasn't unique, wasn't alone. There were others out there facing the same impossible odds, the same deadly prejudice. "What did you tell them?" she asked. "Nothing yet. We wanted to consult you first." Kael moved closer. "This changes everything. If we accept them, the stronghold becomes a sanctuary for hybrid pregnancies, a target for every faction that still believes in the old fears. And if we refuse?" Arya's voice was quiet. "They die. Alone. Hunted. Terrified. The choice wasn't really a choice at all." "Tell them yes," Arya said. "Tell them they're welcome. Tell them we'll protect them the same way we protected ourselves. And tell them," she paused, gathering strength, "tell them they're not alone anymore." Riven nodded slowly. "This is going to get complicated." "It already is complicated." Arya moved to the window, looked out at the stronghold below, at the impossible alliance, at the future she was building one terrified decision at a time. "But at least it'll be complicated together." The messenger departed with their answer. The warlords remained, watching her with expressions that mixed concern and respect. "You know what you just committed to?" Thorne asked. 5 more women, maybe more, all needing protection, all drawing the same threats you did. The stronghold will never be safe again. "It was never safe to begin with," Aria said. "At least now we're fighting for something bigger than just survival." She placed her hand over her stomach, felt the 3 heartbeats pulsing steadily, stronger than before, more confident, as if they knew what their mother had just done, as if they approved. Over the next week, the first refugees arrived. 3 women, 2 human, 1 not, all carrying hybrid children, all terrified, all desperate. Aria met them personally at the gates, offered them shelter without judgment, showed them to rooms that had been prepared with care. "You're safe here," she told each of them. "Whatever you've been told, whatever you've endured, it's over. You're among allies now." They didn't believe her at first. How could they? They'd been running for so long, hunted and hated, that safety felt like a trap. But slowly they began to settle, to relax, to believe that maybe, just maybe, survival was possible. Valdis sent her monthly observer as promised, a stoic warrior named Henrik who watched everything with sharp eyes and reported back in meticulous detail. He was cold, efficient, and utterly professional. He was also the first to acknowledge when one of the other women successfully gave birth to a healthy hybrid child. "Impossible," he muttered, staring at the squalling infant with something like wonder. "The histories all say." "The histories were wrong," Arya said simply, "about a lot of things." Seraphine's observers arrived next. 3 scholars who treated the stronghold like a laboratory, and the pregnant women like subjects. It was invasive and uncomfortable, but Arya endured it, because documentation meant proof, and proof meant credibility. 2 months after the plateau battle, a second woman gave birth, then a third. Both survived. Both children were healthy. The reports went out to all 3 factions, detailed, documented, undeniable. The world was watching, and slowly, painfully slowly, opinions began to shift. Not everywhere, not everyone. There were still fanatics who called for death, still politicians who argued for containment, still ordinary people who couldn't let go of centuries of fear. But there were also others, people who looked at the evidence and saw hope instead of horror, who understood that change was coming whether they liked it or not, who decided that adaptation was wiser than extinction. 4 months after the battle, Aria woke to contractions. She'd known they were coming. Kara had been warning her for days that the children were ready. But knowing didn't make it less terrifying. The labor lasted 18 hours. Brutal, exhausting. There were moments when Aria thought she'd die. Moments when the pain was so intense she couldn't remember why survival mattered. But there were also moments when the golden light would surge through her, when the 3 heartbeats would synchronize with hers, when she felt the children, her children, fighting alongside her. And in the end, she won. 3 babies, 2 boys and a girl, tiny and perfect and blazing with barely contained power. They didn't cry immediately, just looked at her with eyes too aware for newborns, as if they'd been waiting for this moment, as if they knew exactly who she was. Aria held them, all 3 at once, Impossible, but necessary, and felt something fundamental shift in the world. "They're beautiful," Kale whispered from beside the bed. "They're miracles," Riven corrected. "They're ours," Thorn added. "And anyone who tries to take them will regret it." Aria couldn't speak, could only hold her children and cry tears that were equal parts joy and relief and overwhelming love. The observers came. Documented, verified. 3 hybrid children, all healthy, all stable, all showing signs of the same controlled power their mother had demonstrated. The reports went out, and the world held its breath. Valdis was the first to send her response. A single line. "You were right, I was wrong. We are fortunate you were too stubborn to die." Seraphine's message was longer, more formal, but it ended with words that mattered. "Your daughter survived what mine did not. I am grateful, and I am sorry I ever doubted you." Messages came from everywhere, from the southern territories, from the western reaches, from places Aria had never heard of, all saying the same thing in different words. Hope. Maybe there's hope after all. 6 months after the births, the first monitoring period ended. Representatives from all factions gathered once more, this time in the stronghold's Great Hall, where Aria sat with 3 healthy, growing children who showed no signs of becoming the monsters everyone had feared. "The evidence speaks for itself," Henrik said, reading from his report. 6 months of observation, 0 incidents of uncontrolled aggression, multiple instances of protective behavior consistent with normal child development. Power manifestations remain entirely defensive. "Agreed," Seraphine's scholar added. "By every measurable metric, these children are thriving, as are the other hybrid children born in this stronghold under similar conditions." "Which brings us to the question," Valdis said. "Do we continue monitoring, or do we acknowledge that the experiment succeeded?" Silence fell across the hall. Then Aria stood, slowly, carefully. One child balanced on her hip while the other 2 were held by Kael and Riven. "The experiment didn't succeed," she said quietly, "because it was never an experiment. These are children, my children, and they deserve to grow up without being treated like scientific subjects or political bargaining chips." "Then what are you proposing?" Seraphine asked. "That we end the formal monitoring period. That we acknowledge, publicly, that hybrid children can be born safely and raised responsibly. That we stop treating mixed heritage as a crime and start treating it as what it is, the future." Aria's voice strengthened. "The world is changing. We can fight that change and destroy ourselves in the process, or we can adapt, evolve, build something better than what we had." "Pretty words," Henrik said, but his tone wasn't dismissive, just careful. "How do we ensure that safety, that responsibility?" "The same way we ensure it for any children: support, education, community." Aria looked around the hall, at faces that had been hostile 6 months ago and were now cautiously hopeful. "We've proven cooperation works better than conflict. Let's keep proving it. Together." Valdis stood, extended her hand across the table. "Then let's make this permanent. Not a treaty, an alliance. Real, lasting, built on trust instead of fear." Seraphine stood, added her hand. "Agreed." One by one, representatives from every faction joined, hands piled on hands. Promises layered on promises. It wasn't perfect. There would be challenges ahead, Aria knew that. There would be setbacks and arguments and moments when old fears threatened to tear everything apart. But for now, for this moment, it was enough. The alliance held. And in her arms, Aria's daughter opened her eyes. Golden light flickered in their depths, just for a moment, just enough to remind everyone what she was, what she could become. Not a weapon, not a monster, just a child. With the power to change the world. With the power to change the world. The words echoed in Aria's mind as she stood in the great hall, her daughter cradled in her arms, surrounded by representatives who'd come to kill her and stayed to witness something impossible. The golden light in her child's eyes faded, leaving behind just an infant, sleepy, warm, utterly ordinary, except for what she represented. Everything that came after should have been simple. The alliance was formed. The monitoring period ended. The world acknowledged that hybrid children could survive, but Aria had learned that nothing worthwhile was ever simple. The first real test came 3 weeks later. A delegation arrived from the far eastern reaches. Territories so remote they'd had no involvement in the original conflict. They came with 50 armed guards and a leader whose name was whispered with equal parts fear and respect. Chancellor Davos, architect of the Eastern purges that had eliminated hybrid bloodlines from his territories decades ago. "This should be interesting," Thorne muttered as they watched the delegation ride through the gates. "Interesting is one word for it," Riven said. His hand rested on his sword hilt. "Catastrophic is another." Davos was a thin man with silver hair and eyes like chips of flint. He moved with the precision of someone who'd never made an unplanned gesture in his life. When he entered the Great Hall, he didn't bow, didn't offer pleasantries, just studied Aria with the intensity of a predator assessing prey. "So," he said, "you're the woman who claims to have solved an unsolvable problem." "I don't claim anything," Aria replied. She'd learned to keep the children away from potentially hostile meetings, but she made sure Davos could see the empty cradles behind her, a reminder of what she'd survived. "I just refuse to accept that death is the only option." "Noble, naive." Davos moved closer. "I've read the reports, studied the documentation, consulted with scholars far more knowledgeable than your pet academics. And I've reached a conclusion. Which is? That you're either the luckiest woman alive or the most dangerous." He stopped 5 feet away. Close enough to be threatening, far enough to claim civility. "The question is which?" "Does it matter?" Aria asked. "The children are healthy, stable. They've demonstrated no uncontrolled aggression. Every metric confirms metrics can be manipulated. Documentation can be falsified. Words can be lies." Davos's voice was cold. "I didn't travel 3 weeks across frozen wasteland to read reports I've already seen. I came to witness the truth for myself." "The children are sleeping," Kael said. His tone was carefully neutral. "And they stay that way. You don't get to examine them like livestock." "Then how do you expect me to verify anything?" Davos's gaze never left Aria. "How do I know this isn't an elaborate deception? That you haven't hidden the real children, the dangerous ones, and produced healthy human infants to fool inspectors?" The accusation was so absurd, Aria almost laughed. Almost. "You're serious," she said instead. "Completely. I've seen too many lies, too much manipulation to accept anything on faith." Davos gestured to his guards. "I require proof. Real proof. A demonstration of these children's abilities under controlled conditions." "Absolutely not." Riven's voice could have frozen fire. "They're infants, not performers. And I don't care what territories you control or what armies you command, you will not experiment on children in this stronghold." "Then you confirm my suspicion." Davos's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You have something to hide." "We have children to protect," Aria corrected. "From people exactly like you. People who see them as threats first and living beings second. Because they are threats first." Davos's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine fear beneath the cold calculation. "I watched hybrid children tear apart my home province, saw what happened when their power manifested without control. Entire villages burned, hundreds dead, and everyone insisted it was an accident, a tragedy, something that couldn't be prevented." "How old were the children?" Aria asked quietly. Davos blinked. "What?" "The ones who caused the destruction. How old were they? 13? 14? Old enough to know better." "Old enough to be terrified," Aria said. "Old enough to have spent their entire lives being told they were monsters, being feared and isolated and taught that their existence was a crime." She moved closer. "Did anyone try to help them? To teach them control? Or did they just lock them away and hope the problem would solve itself?" Davos's jaw tightened. "We did what we thought was necessary. You did what was easy. You chose fear over compassion, elimination over education, and then you blamed the victims when it ended in tragedy." Aria's voice was steady despite the fury building in her chest. "My children won't grow up like that. They won't be isolated or hated or taught to fear themselves. They'll be loved, supported, given every tool they need to understand and control their abilities. And if you can't accept that, if you insist on seeing them as threats, then you're welcome to leave." Silence filled the great hall. Davos stared at her for a long moment, Then, unexpectedly, he sighed. The sound was heavy, tired. "I had a daughter," he said quietly. "Hybrid, born to my late wife and someone else. I tried to save her, tried to prove she could be raised safely, but my advisors insisted she was too dangerous, and I was too weak to fight them." He paused. "She was 6 when they killed her, 6 years old, and I did nothing." The confession landed like a stone in still water. "I'm sorry," Aria said, and meant it. "Don't be. I made my choice. Lived with the consequences." Davos's eyes were distant. "I came here expecting to find more of the same. More people choosing convenience over courage. More children being sacrificed to appease fears that will never be satisfied." He focused on Aria. "But you're not like them, are you?" "I'm trying not to be." "Good." Davos turned to leave, paused at the door. "I'll submit a favorable report to the Eastern Councils. It won't change everyone's minds, but it might change enough. That's all I can ask." He left without another word. Kael exhaled slowly. "That was unexpected." "Guilt is a powerful motivator," Riven said. "He sees his daughter in these children, wants to believe they can have the future she was denied." "Then let's make sure they do," Aria said. But even as she spoke, she knew the real challenge wasn't changing individual minds. It was changing an entire world's assumptions about what was possible. The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 months after Davos's visit, one of the other women in the stronghold, a quiet refugee named Alara who'd given birth to twins, approached Aria with a proposal. "We should document everything," Alara said. They were in the stronghold's newly established nursery, watching 6 hybrid children play under careful supervision. "Not just for officials, for everyone. Show people what these children are really like when they're not being feared or hunted." "Like a chronicle?" Aria asked. "Like a truth." Alara's eyes were fierce. "For centuries, the only stories about hybrid children have been horror tales, prophecies of doom, warnings about what happens when bloodlines mix. We need to tell different stories, true ones, about children who laugh and cry and learn and grow just like any others." The idea took root quickly. Within weeks, they'd recruited scribes to document daily life in the stronghold, artists to capture moments of ordinary joy, children taking their first steps, learning to speak, discovering their abilities through play rather than fear. The documentation was meticulous, honest. It didn't hide when things went wrong, when a child's power manifested unexpectedly, when control slipped, when accidents happened. But it also showed the aftermath, how the adults responded with patience instead of punishment, how the children learned from mistakes, how community and support created safety where isolation had once bred disaster. The chronicles were copied and distributed to every major territory. Some dismissed them as propaganda, others studied them carefully, looking for cracks in the narrative. But many, more than Aria had dared hope, simply read them and saw children. Just children. The turning point came during the first winter festival. It was Valdis's idea. "We need something public," she'd said during a council meeting. "Something that shows unity, celebration, proof that this alliance is more than just political convenience." So they organized a festival, open to everyone. Representatives from all factions, common citizens, anyone willing to make the journey to the stronghold during the coldest months. Thousands came. The stronghold's courtyard transformed into something Aria had never seen, banners from a dozen territories flying side by side, merchants selling goods from every corner of the continent, musicians playing styles that had never shared space before. And at the center of it all, in a sheltered pavilion, Aria sat with her 3 children. They were 8 months old now, beginning to walk, beginning to show distinct personalities. Her daughter, they'd named her Lyra, was bold and curious, constantly reaching for things she shouldn't touch. The boys, Castor and Finn, were more cautious but equally determined, and all 3 were showing signs of their heritage. Lyra's eyes would flash gold when she was excited. Castor could make small objects levitate when he was concentrating. Finn seemed to sense emotions, responding to people's moods before they spoke. It should have been terrifying. Would have been, a year ago. Now it was just normal. Aria watched as a young mother approached the pavilion hesitantly. She held a child of maybe 2 years, hybrid, based on the slight luminescence in his eyes. Is it true? The woman asked. Her voice shook. That they're safe here? That we don't have to hide anymore? It's true, Aria said. She gestured to the empty seats beside her. You're welcome, both of you. The woman sat, started crying. I've been running for 6 months, sleeping in forests, stealing food, terrified someone would discover us, and she couldn't finish. You don't have to run anymore, Aria said gently. She reached out, squeezed the woman's hand. There's room here, for everyone who needs it. More came after that. Throughout the festival, parents with hybrid children, pregnant women who'd been cast out of their homes, even a few adults who'd survived their own hybrid childhoods and wanted to help others do the same. By the end of the week, the stronghold's population had doubled. We can't sustain this growth, Riven said during an emergency council meeting. Our resources are stretched thin. Our defenses are built for a garrison, not a refugee settlement. Then we expand, Aria said, build more housing, establish better supply lines, create infrastructure that can support a growing community. That takes time. Money, political capital we may not have. Then we find it. Aria looked around the table at 3 warlords who'd started this journey trying to protect their power and were now committed to something larger. We didn't survive everything we've survived just to turn people away because it's inconvenient. It's not about convenience, Kael said carefully. It's about sustainability. If we grow too fast, we collapse. And then we help no one. He was right. Aria knew he was right. But she also knew that turning away desperate people, people who'd come seeking the same safety she'd fought for, was unacceptable. The solution came from Seraphine. The Confederacy will provide resources, she announced during the next council meeting. Building materials, agricultural supplies, medical personnel, in exchange for guaranteed trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. Cultural exchange? Aria asked. We send students to study here, learn from your methods, see firsthand how hybrid children can be raised successfully. Seraphine's amber eyes were sharp. And in return, you send representatives to our territories, share your knowledge, help us establish similar programs. It was brilliant, strategic, a way to spread the model beyond one stronghold. We accept, Aria said before anyone could object. Valdis offered similar terms. So did Davos. Even smaller territories that had been watching from the sidelines began pledging support. The stronghold, this frozen fortress that had been meant as a prison, was transforming into something else entirely. A sanctuary. A symbol. A proof that change was possible. But success brought new dangers. The first assassination attempt came during Lyra's first birthday celebration. Aria was showing her daughter how to blow out a candle when the world exploded. Not literally, but close enough. An explosion in the kitchens. Fire racing through corridors, guards shouting, children screaming. Thorn appeared from nowhere, grabbed Aria and all 3 children, and ran. They made it to a secure room deep in the stronghold's heart before the second explosion hit. Coordinated attack, Thorn said, his voice tight. Multiple entry points, professional, well-funded. The cult? Aria asked. She was clutching her children so hard they whimpered. Or someone new, does it matter? He moved to the door, listened. Kael and Riven are coordinating the response. We're locked down until they give the all clear. The wait was excruciating. Every sound made Aria flinch. Every moment stretched into eternity. When the door finally opened, it was Kael. He was covered in soot and blood, but alive. It's over, he said. 12 attackers, all dead. We're searching for more, but initial sweep suggests they worked alone. Casualties? Aria's voice was barely a whisper. 3 guards. 1 civilian who was in the wrong place. Kael's expression was grim. Could have been worse. Should have been worse. Our new security protocols worked. This is because of the festival, Aria said. Because we opened the gates, made ourselves visible. This is because fanatics exist, Kael corrected, and they always will. We can hide from them, or we can prepare for them. We chose preparation. He was right, but that didn't make the dead any less dead. Over the next months, there were more attacks, smaller, less coordinated, always failures. Because the alliance held. Because three armies that had once been enemies now shared intelligence and resources. Because people who'd learned to work together were stronger than those who worked alone. Lyra's second birthday came and went, then her third. The boys hit milestones, started talking, started learning to control their abilities with help from instructors who approached their education with patience instead of fear. The chronicles documented everything, not just successes, failures too. Moments when control slipped, when accidents happened, when the children's power manifested in unexpected ways. But they also showed the aftermath, how problems were solved, how trust was built, how community created safety. The world watched, and slowly, painfully slowly, began to believe. By the time the children were 5, the stronghold had become something unprecedented. Not just a fortress, not just a sanctuary, a city, a thriving community of thousands, hybrid children and their families, scholars studying new methods of power control, diplomats learning to bridge old divides. And at its center, Aria. She'd never wanted to be a leader, never aspired to build something this large. But somewhere between survival and success, she'd become the person others looked to, the voice that others trusted. It was exhausting, overwhelming. Some days she wanted nothing more than to disappear into obscurity and let someone else make the impossible decisions. But then she'd watch her children playing with others, watch hybrid kids who'd never known fear or hiding laugh freely, watch parents who'd spent years running finally rest, and she'd remember why it mattered. The final test came on a spring morning when Lyra was 7. Aria was meeting with territorial representatives when her daughter burst into the council chamber, her eyes blazing pure gold, her small hands crackling with barely contained power. "Mama," she said, not scared, just urgent. "Something's wrong." Every guard in the room reached for weapons, every representative tensed. Aria stood slowly, moved to her daughter, knelt to eye level. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I can feel them," Lyra said. Her voice was strange, layered. "Outside the walls, lots of them. They're afraid and angry, and they're coming to hurt us." A chill ran down Aria's spine. Lyra's ability to sense emotions had been developing, but she'd never demonstrated this kind of range. "How many?" Aria asked calmly. "Hundreds? Maybe thousands." Lyra's eyes tracked to the window. "They're scared of me, of what I can do, and they think killing me will make them safe." The council chamber erupted in shouted orders, guards mobilizing, representatives demanding answers. Chaos. But Aria just held her daughter's face between her hands. "Listen to me," she said. "Those people are afraid because they don't understand. But that doesn't mean they're right, and it doesn't mean we respond with violence." "Then what do we do?" Aria stood, looked at the assembled leaders, people who'd spent years building this alliance, this community, this proof that coexistence was possible. "We show them," she said, "not with words, with actions. We walk out there, all of us, and we prove that fear doesn't have to win." "That's suicide," Riven said. "It's faith," Aria corrected, "in everything we've built, everything we've proven. If we hide now, we prove them right, that we're dangerous, that we need to be controlled or eliminated. But if we walk out there with our children and our truth, we give them a choice. Be afraid or be better." "And if they choose violence?" Kael asked. Aria looked at Lyra, at her sons, who'd been brought to the chamber by worried caretakers, at all the other hybrid children who'd been gathered for safety. "Then we defend ourselves," she said, "like we always have. But we give them the chance to choose differently first." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Valdis stood. "I'll walk with you." Seraphine rose. "As will I." One by one, every representative in the chamber stood, committed, united. They gathered in the courtyard, hundreds of people, leaders and families and children. The gates opened, and together they walked out. The army waiting outside was massive, 10,000 strong, maybe more. Banners from territories Aria didn't recognize, faces carved from stone and certainty. At their head, a woman in gleaming armor, young, fierce, clearly someone who'd never been told no. "I am Commander Saren," she called across the distance, "and I've come to end this madness." "What madness is that?" Aria asked. She stood at the front of her people, Lyra holding her hand, the boys flanking her. "This sanctuary, This corruption of natural law, this breeding ground for abominations that will destroy us all. Saren's voice rang clear. I've read your chronicles, studied your documentation, and I've concluded that you're either deluded or lying. Either way, you're dangerous. Have you met any of these children? Aria asked. I don't need to. The histories are wrong, Aria interrupted. About a lot of things. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can see for yourself. Talk to the parents. Observe the children. Make your own judgment based on evidence instead of prophecy. I've made my judgment, Saren said, and my army agrees. You have 1 hour to surrender the hybrid children. After that, we take them by force. The air went cold. Aria felt Lyra's hand tighten in hers, felt the golden light beginning to build beneath her daughter's skin, felt the same power awakening in her son's. No, Aria said simply. Then you choose war. I choose to give you a choice. Aria stepped forward, alone, leaving the safety of her allies behind. You can attack. You can try to take my children by force, but before you do, I want you to know what you're really choosing. She gestured behind her, at the community that had gathered, at the families standing united, at the children, hybrid and human alike, watching with wide eyes. These people came here because they had nowhere else to go, because every other territory told them their children were monsters. That love wasn't enough. That fear was the only rational response. Aria's voice carried across the frozen ground. And we proved them wrong. Not with propaganda, not with lies. With 8 years of evidence, 8 years of children growing up healthy and safe. 8 years of power being controlled and directed and used for protection instead of destruction. 8 years of delusion, Saren countered. Then prove it. Aria stopped 10 feet from Saren's horse, close enough to see the doubt hiding beneath the commander's certainty. Stay. Observe. Test us. If you find evidence that these children are the threats you believe, then we'll discuss what happens next. But if you find they're just children trying to live, then maybe you reconsider which side of history you want to stand on. Saren stared at her, at this unarmed woman who'd walked away from safety to stand alone. At the children behind her glowing with barely contained power but not attacking. At the impossible community that shouldn't exist but somehow did. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, Saren said slowly, or the stupidest. I've heard that before, Aria said. Still haven't figured out which one is true. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Saren dismounted, walked forward on foot until she stood directly in front of Aria. 1 week, she said. I'll give you 1 week to prove your claims. If I see anything that suggests these children are unstable or dangerous, I'll resume my mission. Understood? Understood, Aria said. They clasped hands, an agreement forged in tension and desperate hope. The army didn't disperse, but they didn't attack either. They made camp outside the stronghold's walls and waited. The week that followed was the longest of Aria's life. Saren was thorough, relentless. She interviewed parents and children, observed classes and playtime, studied the security protocols and emergency procedures. She looked for cracks, for evidence that would justify her prejudice, and found none. On the 7th day, Saren requested a private meeting. Just her and Aria, in a quiet room with no guards or witnesses. I came here expecting to find a cult, Saren said without preamble. A group of fanatics so committed to their delusion that they couldn't see truth. Instead, I found... She paused, struggled with the words. I found a community. Imperfect, complicated, but functional, safe. More safe than many human settlements I've visited. We work hard to make it that way, Aria said. I can see that. Saren moved to the window, stared out at the courtyard where children, hybrid and human alike, were playing under supervision. I have orders to eliminate the threat, to ensure these children never reach adulthood and potentially fulfill the prophecies. Aria's blood went cold. But I'm also a soldier, and soldiers operate on intelligence, evidence, reality. Saren turned back. And the reality is that everything I was told about hybrid children was wrong. They're not monsters. They're not apocalypse waiting to happen. They're just children who need guidance and support and love. Same as any others. Then what will you do? I'll tell my commanders the truth, that the threat they fear doesn't exist, that the sanctuary they wanted destroyed is actually making the world safer, not more dangerous. Saren's expression hardened. They won't like it. They'll probably send someone else, someone less willing to question orders. Then we'll deal with that when it comes. You're not afraid? I'm terrified, Aria admitted. Every day. But fear doesn't get to dictate my choices anymore. I've learned that much, at least. Saren nodded slowly. You remind me of my mother. She led a rebellion that everyone said was impossible. Died, believing she'd failed. But 20 years later, the changes she fought for became law. She moved to the door, paused. I can't promise this will end peacefully, but I can promise I'll tell the truth. What happens after that? She shrugged. That's up to people braver than me. She left. Her army departed the next morning, not defeated, not converted, just informed, carrying evidence that would force difficult conversations in territories that had operated on fear for centuries. It was a start. 3 months later, the first formal recognition came from the Eastern Councils, a declaration that hybrid children born under supervised conditions would be granted the same legal protections as human children. 6 months after that, the Confederacy followed suit. Slowly, slower than Aria would have liked, the world began to change. Not everywhere, not all at once. There were still territories where hybrid children were killed on sight, still fanatics who believed the old prophecies, still people who chose fear over evidence. But there were also more sanctuaries, more communities adopting the stronghold's model, more children growing up without having to hide what they were. On Lyra's 10th birthday, Aria stood on the stronghold's highest tower and looked out at the world they'd helped reshape. The frozen wasteland was still frozen. The stronghold was still a fortress, but it was also a home, a city, a beacon for anyone who'd been told their existence was impossible. Mama? Lyra appeared beside her, 10 years old and already showing signs of the woman she'd become, confident, powerful, kind. Are you okay? I'm good, sweetheart. Aria pulled her daughter close. Just thinking. About what? About how far we've come. How much has changed. She looked down at Lyra's upturned face. When you were born, people said you'd never survive, that your existence was an affront to nature, that the world would be better off if you'd never been born. That's stupid, Lyra said. Yes, it was. Aria smiled. But they believed it, really believed it, and we had to prove them wrong one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. Did we? Lyra asked. Prove them wrong? Aria gestured to the city below, at the thousands of people living in harmony, at the other hybrid children playing in streets that used to know only war, at the future being built in real time. What do you think? She asked. Lyra studied the scene, then smiled, bright and fierce and full of hope. I think we're just getting started, she said. And she was right. Because this was never really about Aria, or her children, or even this sanctuary. It was about proving that the future didn't have to be built on the same fears that destroyed the past. That change was possible. That courage and community and stubborn refusal to accept impossible could reshape the world. 10 years ago, Aria had woken in a frozen fortress with 3 warlords standing over her and a heartbeat inside her that everyone said would kill her. Now she stood on a tower overlooking a thriving city, watching her children grow into everything their enemies had feared they'd become: powerful, yes, but also compassionate, intelligent, and committed to building something better. The prophecies had been wrong, not because hybrid children weren't powerful, but because power was never the real threat. Fear was. And Aria had learned, had taught her children, had proven to the world that fear only won when you let it. She'd chosen differently, and in choosing had changed everything. Kale joined her on the tower, then Riven, then Thorn. The 3 warlords who'd started this journey trying to protect their power and had ended it building something far more valuable: a family, a community, a future. Any regrets? Kyle asked. Aria thought about it, about the pain and fear and impossible choices, about Mira and the guards who died protecting her, about the scars, physical and otherwise, that would never fully heal. No, she said finally. Not one. Because she'd stood at the edge of death and chose to fight, had faced armies and chose peace, had been offered every easy way out and chose the hard path that led to something real. And in the end, she hadn't just survived, she'd won. Not through violence, not through power, but through the simple, radical act of refusing to let fear write her story. The sun set over the frozen stronghold, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below, lights began to flicker on as the city prepared for evening. Children's laughter drifted up on the wind, and Aria stood surrounded by her family, both the one she'd born and the one she'd built, and knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. The beginning of something new, where power, courage, and choice would shape the future, and fear would finally, irrevocably lose,